my push for most things is me seeing something that seems difficult or there's a puzzle there, and I want to see if I could do it. That's always been kind of like the driving force of everything I do. Like, I never thought myself a content creator, and I just wanted to know. And I did it, and it was cool, so I kept doing it.
It's like a self-challenge. It's an internal challenge for yourself. Can I break this, or can I like create this new paradigm, it sounds like?
Yeah, exactly. That's everything. Everything I do is always about challenging something and seeing if I can do something that's very difficult. This sounds really cheesy, but like stay true to who you are and make content that you like, right? Because content is like it's an endurance game. It's about staying consistent without burning yourself out. Because technically I can make 2 or 3 videos a week, but I also want to reserve a lot of spare time for myself. That's just the rhythm that I'm comfortable with. My mental health will be better, and I can keep grinding this game, because to me, content creation is all about endurance. If you put too much like on your plate, eventually you just burn out.
Welcome to Humans of Magic. My guest this week is Rebell Son. Rebell is a content creator, YouTuber, and UX designer. She's also a member of the Commander Advisory Group and deeply passionate about building the communities around her. We talked about Rebell's content creation journey, her super valuable perspective on grinding content, and even what it means to be Asian American. Oh, by the way, make sure you tune into the YouTube version of the podcast. Rebell name drops a lot of people, and I added subtitles for the names. Without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with Rebell Son. Rebell, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. What have you been up to recently? I guess there's been a lot of stuff happening in the Magic world, but also just how are things in general?
There's always stuff happening. Everything's been good. I've been playing a lot of Arena. I was just playing Arena like right before this. So I've been playing a lot of Explorer, and I'm really enjoying my blue-green Delver deck.
Okay. My understanding is that you play Delver. Like, is that one of your favorite archetypes in Magic, or a similar strategy?
I honestly really looked into like everybody kind of knows what Delver is, but I've seriously started to look into like playing that deck kind of like the last couple months, because I started to try more, I tried to go back to 1v1 kind of Magic formats again, and to learn those skills better and to like practice all that stuff better. I really wanted to find a punishing deck, and I was like, I want to learn Delver. I want to be a good Delver player. So then I played Arena, because Arena, unlike MTGO, lets me play like for free, basically, as long as I have the cards, as much as I want. I think MTGO, you need to like get the ticket or like buy tickets to play in a league, and then you get like better opponents. While Arena, technically, I guess if you like rank high enough, you will have like better opponents. So yeah, I've been playing a lot of Delver decks in Arena.
Have you been playing Historic for long, or it's? Oh, I'm sorry. It's what was
Explorer.
You said Explorer. I get mixed up all the time with the different formats now. There's just a lot of them out there. So apologies.
No,
yeah.
It's okay. Explorer, by the way, is fake Pioneer. So until they have all the cards on Arena for Pioneer, they have Explorer.
Okay. And how did your session go today? Did you have fun? Did you stream or just play on your own?
I play on my own. I'm not much of a streamer, actually. So for this stuff, I'm just like silently practicing in my room, just grinding game after game. And I had a really good time, actually. This deck turned out to be really cool. I used to have a blue-red Delver deck. I tried to force Is It Delver and Explorer, and I think I got to Diamond, but it was like a lot of work. Like, that deck is not very good. And then I played this one, and so far I'm still in Platinum, but I just started playing like a couple days ago again, and this deck just feels a lot better. So I think this one most likely can go a little further than the other one. So it feels good.
Yeah. I didn't play the format, but I have played Expressive Iteration quite a lot. Is that something that is very tough to do without? It sounds like you were just saying blue-red was actually harder in some ways, even though it had the card, right?
It's because Expressive Iteration is banned in Pioneer and Explorer.
That explains
too.
it.
Yeah, so you actually don't have Expressive Iteration, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to play.
Excellent.
I forgot what it's called. There's a red spell that is like a fake expressive iteration where you exile 2 cards, and onto your next turn you can play them.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I
It's a
tried
sorcery.
playing that in Modern at one point just to see if it could be expressive number 5 and number 6. It did not have the same effect.
No, expressive iteration feels so good. I haven't played with expressive iteration till this year. I started playing Modern. I have a money pile deck, and the first time I resolved expressive iteration, I was like, oh. Magic can play like this, exile Bobble, like, or exile a land, play Bobble, or like whatever. Like, it's just so good. That card's so good. Feels very
It's
good.
crazy. It's crazy too because I know you've been playing Magic for a while. I'm sure, and I've been playing Magic for a while, and it just seems like whenever cards first come out, people always misevaluate them. I still remember when EI was out, and even being assessed for Eternal formats like Legacy and Modern, people were like, I'm not really sure about this card. You know, like, is it really good enough? And then at some point, it just becomes like everyone plays it as a 4 of. And that whole leap into from like, I don't know about this card whatsoever into this is a guaranteed 4 of, that always strikes me as very fascinating because I always feel like there's a bit of groupthink into that as well. It's almost like you make it a reality. It's like if enough people believe the thing, then it becomes real. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So actually, there's I could talk about this for a really long time. So I'm not going to take too
please
much
do.
of an interview about this. Okay,
That's fine.
So stuff like expressive iteration. Like I think everybody, like the meme is like nobody in Magic really knows how to like read like assess cards when it comes out, right? And cards like expressive iteration or like a lot of other Magic cards, you don't see the effect or like feel the effect until you actually pick up the card and play it, right? And I think expressive iteration and a lot of other cards are like that. And a big concern of mine, especially with this year's like product cadence, maybe even last year, is that there's so much product coming out that there's a lot of cards that we're just not able to like assess properly for Commander or competitive Commander. And something I talk about a little bit with I don't know if you know who Charles Swang is. Charles Swang, mono white guy.
Ivaldi, mono white guy.
Ivaldi, yes, yeah. So Charles brought up that there's all these cards he likes to play that people have never seen before and don't really know the value of, but he plays them, like perfectly. It's used as a special like tool to do a specific thing, and it attacks a meta in a very specific way. And the cards have always been there. That's the thing. It's just no one ever looks at them. And with I guess the concept of groupthink, right? With all these decks in like competitive Commander, how do we know like if we've really tapped into like, or how much of the format have we tapped into if there's this kind of like deluge of cards and we don't have any time to look at any of it? And there's like cards right now, like the Transformer cards, where I'm like reading the card and I read through that card halfway. I'm like, I don't know what this card does. And there's another book on the backside, right? And it's, I think those cards are like expressive iteration, where when you read it, you might not feel the effect until you actually play with the card. I think there's a lot of cards like that we haven't really explored well enough. So there might be a lot more expressive iterations out there that haven't been banned yet.
It's so unique because Magic's one of those games where you actually get a heads up, like an early preview of the pieces before you're actually able to play them in a game. Imagine a computer game where they actually announce like, oh, this is the new like wizard class or barbarian class, and you are able, this is what it does. This is the in-game physics of that piece, and here are the powers. It's like, it's just so hard to assess because if you can't plug it into the game, like you just don't know. Like nobody really knows. And I love your point about mono white guy as well, because as you probably know now, going into 1v1 formats, it's like when there are not enough incentives to break a format, then people are not going to try, right? Like that mono white guy is going to explore something because they're really into it. You're going to explore something because you're really into it, but you're not exploring for the purpose of like, I want to win this like 50K CEDH tournament, right? Or I'm just throwing an example out there. Maybe there is a 50K CEDH tournament, and people will then try to. There will be, and people will like in the future, and people will try to break the format. But if there isn't enough incentives to break the format, then people can just have fun. But then that also introduces the other problem of like then everything is kind of subjective. Like I don't know if I'm expressing myself super well, but
no, I hear you, and it's. I actually was just talking about this with someone else too, where, especially with content creation these days, you're not incentivized to actually crack a format to the degree that you might have in the past. So, for example, or the reason why is because viewers just don't really care about meta decks. Like, there's a subset of viewers who do, but a lot more players want to watch the janky fun deck beat the underdog beat the meta deck, right? They want to learn more about all the weird things out there. And if someone makes a video that's like, here's a 2-hour critique on the 2 flex slots of Blue Red Delver, like the audience of that is so much smaller. So as a content creator, you're actually not incentivized to like publish that information publicly. Like you are personally as like a grinder or like a very competitive player, you amongst your players are sharing the information and practicing and doing all that stuff. But the actual sharing of that knowledge, you're not incentivized to do that just because like people don't really want to watch it. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
You have to entertain, right? And that's just not very entertaining. And I have this talk with content creators all the time. It's like, of course, you have to build something for yourself, which makes it sustainable. But you also have to care a lot about your audience. And if you're going to like put out a video like that and it gets 5 views and nobody cares about it, then you're just not incentivized in whatsoever to do that. Like your patrons don't want it. Your YouTube subscribers don't want it. Like, who wants it? Like, it's probably not even video format, right? It's probably like more like just a tweet or an article or something. It's like, because that's what grinders will consume. I don't know any grinder that honestly like will watch like a 1 or 2 hour video essay on Magic. It just doesn't really happen. Maybe there's exceptions, but it just doesn't seem like it to me. So
I think you would have to be like, the subject has to be really good, and you are like
you have to be like a PV as well. Like you have to have someone like people are just coming into the door because of your name or your background or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I do want to ask you, Rebel, like how did you decide to get into 1v1?
So before I played Commander, I used to play a lot of Modern. That was like kind of my jam. I played a lot of Modern, and then I had a competitive gaming problem. Like I had really bad anger issues. I still do. It's better now. It's a lot better now. But back in the day, it used to be really, really bad. And it didn't really bleed into Modern as much. But what I tried to do was to like kind of solve that problem was play less competitive games, which is why I moved over to Commander. So then I won't be incentivized to like kind of care about the game the same way a competitive game would, and I just played a lot more single player games, all that stuff. Right? I just stopped playing online like competitive gaming or like local competitive gaming just to like get that out of my life or whatever. So I played Commander, but then eventually some people like within my meta brought a lot stronger decks, and we can probably talk about that later.
Okay,
and
so the arm race started. Yeah,
and I eventually got back to playing competitive. New York sounds. Competitive Commander, and then now that I'm playing Commander a lot, and I've done a lot of events and stuff like that, I'm trying to like solve the same problem with like my competitive gaming issues by like trying to just be a better Magic player first of all, and also in that process like be a better competitor, which is why I'm playing 1v1 again.
So it's kind of like a full circle.
Yeah, exactly.
When you first started playing Commander, was it hard to turn off the competitive or salty aspects of yourself?
Actually not really. Like when I first played Commander, the first time I ever played Commander, I bought the Kalia Precon, and back then like there weren't nearly as many Commander players at all. and the only other person at my college who played Magic had a 60 card deck that he built back when he played World Wake. And I have this 100 card precon, so I played it straight as a singleton deck with no special rules, just 20 life, and we played, and I still beat him. It was very funny. But that was the first time I ever played Commander. It was just playing it as like a straight up deck. And then eventually I went to an LGS in New York called it's not 20-sided, it is Uncommons. This for like, I don't know, all you New Yorkers, they might be like, yeah, Uncommons. Uncommons has this back room where they would host Commander Night, and I dragged one of my friends out to like play it, because he's like a really big Magic brewer, not really much of a player, he just likes brewing. I'm like, oh, you have to play Commander, it's like the brewer's dream, you get to like build 100 cards and it's like all singleton, you'll love it. So I dragged him out with me, and we started playing a lot of Commander there, and those games I never really got like I never really got mad, and I found I really enjoyed those games, because what I love about Commander, or just Magic in general, is when I'm able to see like kind of like how it's like a story, right? Like how this card off in the distance nobody cares about. It has modular 1. Who cares what it does, right? 20 turns later, this big dragon is attacking, and somehow he needs 1 more power. And then this guy kills the modular 1 thing and puts a +1/+1 counter. And then, like, you know, that amazing story is created out of these cards that have like no like direct influence or like relationship. It just happened to be that way, right? And it's like kind of storytelling, but also sometimes you're able to see like, oh, if I have modular and then if I have hardened scales and this thing dies, this thing gets 2 +1/+1 counters. Like, you're able to see those synergies and the mechanics of the game. So like those things, I just really love just sitting there like watching, like thinking to myself like, oh god, if that person does that and that thing does that, like, oh, all this fun stuff happens. So I never really got mad at all like playing just Commander. It's only when I started playing competitive Commander like it came back.
Old habits or mindsets die hard, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is it about that intricacy of Magic and the modular 1 thing fitting together with the dragon, or like figuring out these ways to realize board states? Like, it's almost like the way you describe it, Magic's almost like it's a story, but it's also a puzzle. It's also something that is very intricate, like a puzzle box, and you're constantly trying to figure out like there's a new knob here that can turn on this thing over here, which might even be like the third player or so. Like there's almost infinite combinations of things. Like I'm curious, what is there something in your past or background that makes you particularly attracted to it? Like, for example, were you like really into puzzles? Were you just into games in general, or what was it?
My when I was like 6, I don't know, very young, my mom would give me puzzle books, and that was my thing. I would just do little puzzle books at home, and that was like my playtime, which is like the most Asian parent thing you probably ever heard. It's just like playing with puzzles, and solving problems. And I always I think a lot of Magic players really enjoy like solving puzzles, because that's what all Magic is, right? It's like trying to solve the puzzle. If there's 2 blockers, they're at 20 life. How do I, solve the puzzle of getting them to 0? And I'm also a UX like designer as my occupation, so systems design is like also a thing I'm into. So like I think it all just kind of like weaves together, where I just like looking at a lot of very complex things and then like trying to find like synergies or like other relationships, and then like doing things to like, it's almost like pulling on those strings to get the story to unfold, or get the machine to work that way.
You mentioned having like anger issues or being angry or salty at Magic. Like, where do you think that comes from?
Oh, I know exactly where this comes from, because I've had this discussion a lot with my friends. So basically, I think to be really frank about it, is like when I don't do well in a game, and Magic actually isn't that bad. It's when I play like Overwatch and like other games like that where it gets really, really bad. Overwatch was a really interesting experience for me because until Overwatch came out, I've never played a first-person shooter game like in my life. Like I played Halo, but I never played competitive Halo. I just played the story mode and like had fun that way. But Overwatch was like, oh, this is cool. Like I like the game, I like the characters. What I want to do is I want to play Widowmaker. I want to pick the hardest, like, sniper character, and I want to be really good at Widowmaker. That's my thing. So then what I did was I locked myself into my room for like a whole weekend and just practiced Widowmaker. I looked at some guides and like just did the rounds and like practiced flicking and like all that other stuff. And I got really, really good at Widowmaker. People like back then would be like, oh, this person's aimbotting or whatever. I'm like, no, I just practiced a lot. But then when I would play my friends and my team might not like be doing very well, I will get really upset because it's not necessarily my friends, but in my mind, it's a reflection of me. Like my performance as a reflection of me, and if I'm not doing well, if I lose a game, I think I imagine my opponents is looking down on me, so it makes me very upset. Sometimes now Magic is somewhat similar. I think it's the same thing, but it has the added like layer of Overwatch. I think the decision making is more real time, so it's more acceptable, I guess, to make the wrong decision because it's split second, right? Like, you miss and you're done. You don't crouch and you get headshot or whatever. In Magic, you have a lot more time. Not like too much, but you do have a lot more time. And I think the mistakes are so much more punishing because you had sort of all the time in the world to make the right decision and you made the wrong one, and that one's gonna live with you forever. So
is it also true in Overwatch, like a lot of first-person shooters, there's effectively no variance? It's more like chess in that it's completely skill-based, right? Or I could be wrong here.
I mean, I think there might. I mean, I didn't play Overwatch like that competitively to be able to say like confidently that there's no variance. But I think it's definitely a lot more skill based. And there's less variance, but there's probably still some variance of like, depending on which character you have, like Junkrats, like little grenades, like they randomly bounce around. So sometimes it just happens that they bounce right on your face or whatever and you die, right? Widowmaker, on the other hand, there is all skill.
All skill.
Yeah, all skill. If I miss that shot, it's on me.
What made you even get into Overwatch, being your first shooter game that you
just like
played
the
seriously?
I think it was fun. I remember playing like just with my friends. The characters are cute, and it's just like the animation style is nice. Like it just visually looked nice, and the Blizzard games was built nice as well, and it was just fun. So I just wanted to like be really good at this game.
So you did feel like your performance as the character is kind of like a reflection of you, or to put it another way, like if you didn't do well, then that would be some sort of. If you did well, it would be some sort of validation. If you didn't do well, it would be something against that. Is that fair to say?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
But Magic has that issue too, right? Because like you don't say this person, like this commander beat me or this card beat me. You say this person beat me. So but you're saying it's kind of it's degrees, right? So it's better in some respects, or
I think it's the same. I've just learned how to process it better now. I think as now, especially with the added layer of content creation and other things like that, there's other pressures and things like that while I'm playing this game, and I've worked very hard to try to like learn how to control that aspect of it.
Okay. Can you tell me a bit about your background? Like, where did you grow up, and maybe things that people may not know about you just through the Magic stuff? Like, just start real simple. Like, where did you grow up, and tell me about your family and basically your background.
Oh, this one, you'll have fun with this. It'll take a while. So
I have all the time in the world.
Let's see if your audience has all the time in the world. So I was born in Ohio, and then I moved to Hong Kong in 1997 because that's when handover was back to China. So my mom, my dad flew us back to Hong Kong to get a Hong Kong ID and all that stuff and all this other, we just flew back for handover basically. And then I left Hong Kong to Singapore in 2000s, like the year 2000, yeah, Y2K, if you remember that. And then
I do.
2008, I went to Beijing for a year. And then after that, I flew to New York, where I went to school, and then that's kind of like that's the timeline. So here's the family part. So my dad is a triad member.
Okay.
Yeah,
From in Hong Kong, he
in
was.
Hong Kong. Yeah, or he has
Or still is.
Who knows? He had a background with near that, let's say, community. So his parents sent my parents to the U.S. to kind of like get him away from that kind of thing. And then when there's like a lot of wild stuff that happened in the U.S. with my dad too. Nothing illegal, just like action movie stuff. My dad loves Wolverine.
Action movie stuff. What happens?
Yeah, it's very funny. It's very dramatic. But my dad loves Wolverine, and he's the type of guy who's like, he has all the you know how like there are those kind of big altars with like the gods, the Chinese gods, like the statues. My dad would have like 20 statues. Like he would have a massive altar and like have like 20 oranges and like and it would all be like the war god or whatever. And he always like kind of like he wants to be like Wolverine or like the guy on the streets, like, you know, that kind of thing. And then in 97, we moved back to Hong Kong, and he immediately like went back to his friends. So that's why my mom in 2000 was like, maybe this isn't a good environment to raise a kid in. So then my mom just like left with me to Singapore. Like she called me one day and was like, hey, can you pack just like a bag of your favorite toys? And I was like, sure. And then I packed it and I met her downstairs and then got on a plane. And then I landed in Singapore and I was like, hey, Mom, when's Dad coming? And she's like, he's going to be coming like a little later. And then eventually, like, I just figured out, you know, like he's just never going to come. so then I realized what happened. And then what got me, so actually in Singapore, that's when I first really played Magic. My dad actually bought me a Magic deck in Hong Kong. It was Three Kingdoms because he saw the Three Kingdoms art and was like,
yeah.
Oh, that's tough. You know, like he loves that stuff. So he bought me this, Magic intro deck or whatever the starter deck for Three Kingdoms. I remember I opened it and it has a page. The only thing I remember, I did not remember any of the cards. I looked at the card and I'm like, this is dumb. I remember the piece of paper that it came with had it was like a little paper playmat, and it had these little like places where you're supposed to indicate where you are in 20 life. And I was like, this is the cool thing. Those cards are lame. I like this paper, and I will like play with the paper and my toys. And then never thought about Magic. I didn't even know what it was. He didn't even know what it was. He just saw the art for Three Kingdoms and thought it was the toughest thing in the world. But in Singapore, that's when I really started playing Magic. And then I moved to Beijing, where there's a lot less Magic. And eventually got back into Magic in New York.
That's awesome. So your mom and dad, like when your mom met your dad, did she must have already known of his past and family history. So was it just something that she willingly got into as a relationship, or how did that work dynamically?
Yeah. So, she would tell me like,
obviously she changed her mind, I guess, in Hong Kong later, but that was much later. Yeah.
I think when she was younger, she was falling for like the bad boy, and she's gonna, make him good. That kind of like fantasy where like you can fix him. But then, he is who he is. And I think him being my mom did help a lot of things, but there's also a lot to him that you can't just have someone, fix or whatever, right? Or alter. To set kind of like the stage of the tragedy of my father. It's very dramatic. So my dad, is kind of important in my dad's side of the family because he's the first sons, first sons, first sons, first, that kind of thing. He's the first sons of the first sons, right? Technically, I am too. So he, his parents, my grandparents, eventually had my uncle, so his younger brother. But my great grandfather, no, my grandfather left my grandmother because he just found a younger woman. So my grandmother couldn't afford raising both sons. So what she did was she gave my dad to my great grandparents to raise, while she raised my uncle. So that whole experience just kind of like, I think, made it very difficult for him to grow up as a child, like thinking your parents don't want you. And
200%.
Right. So it kind of all makes sense.
That impacts, shapes you as a person forever. Yeah.
Yes. So
forever, like into the next life, if there is such a thing. Like, yeah.
Yes. So my mom, of course knows all this background. So she's like, he is actually just misunderstood. And the thing about my dad is that's really interesting, is when my dad has an aura, he's like this massive Chinese guy with dragon and tiger tattoos. If you imagine what a gangster looks like, that's him. Okay. He's this massive, tall Chinese guy. And I don't know if you've ever been to Hong Kong, but Hong Kong is usually packed. Like the streets are packed, right? If you go to Mongkok, all packed. When I used to travel with my dad, the people in front of him would part ways for him. Like they don't even know what he looks like. They can feel his energy because
it's
he's
the
just
aura, right? As you said.
It sounds weird, I guess, for people who might not believe in it or like haven't experienced it. But some people just have an innate like presence that even if you don't look at them, that this person, I guess is of significance or something like that, right? Or imposing in a way. So my dad, a lot of times is this very like imposing, towering, like, terrifying man. But then he's also like the most respectful, like, I guess, I don't know how to explain it. Like he's like a traditional Chinese guy where he's like calls everyone by like titles and stuff like that. And just treats everyone really well, but he switches. Like he will sometimes then be like the worst guy ever. So I think, that's always been his kind of like duality. And my mom, knows all of this. So she tries to like keep him on one side and not the other. And she would tell me these like really cute stories where like when they were dating, he would wait for her outside every single day at school, and he would have this French bulldog with him. So he would just wait there, looking like really fancy, like button shirt, but like kind of open with like a French bulldog and a nice car behind him. And then as she's leaving school every day, everyone knows that's Joe. You don't mess with Joe, and she's Joe's girlfriend, so you don't mess with her either. Yeah.
I can imagine there's a kind of old schoolness or like traditional aspect to your dad that is also very attractive, because I think the complexity of just human beings in general is that we're all like have different aspects of ourselves. And so like there's one side of him that can be menacing, but there's also another side that can be really, I assume it's like if you're in his circle, then you're in the circle, then you get loyalty, then you have like reciprocation, or like there's a lot of good that comes with it as well. So that's what it sounds like to me, and maybe I'm projecting, but I know in Asian society there are like, or not, it's just in society people are complicated, right? So
yeah,
it's you can't just say this person is X, because obviously we're all like more than just X, right? X and Y and Z. So
yeah, he is definitely like kind of the best and worst friend to have, because he's always got your back, that kind of thing. But also sometimes like you'll never know, which side of him you're getting. So yeah. I think that also so the thing with like my dad is I've never really seen that part as like his child. So like I know of it. I've seen him do it to other people, but I never was raised in a situation where he would like, hit me or whatever, or like yell at me. He was never that guy. He actually kind of caught, if you can tell, with all the stuff in my background, I have a lot of stuff. It's because he used to buy me basically a toy a day. Like maybe a toy every couple days, but it was a lot. It was too much. And my mom, she told me actually she doesn't know if I ever realized, like, if I ever actually appreciate those things. I think he liked it more than I did. But he, like, that's the kind of guy he is. He just like took really, in his way, took really good care of me, and like showed me as much love as he could in his own, you know, way of doing so.
Yeah, we all have our own vocabulary, right? As a parent or as a person. Yeah.
But I think for my mom, when we went back to Hong Kong and she saw who, you know, he's hanging out with again, she was like, what if one day he wrongs a wrong person, and then that person comes to our house, you know, and does bad things, which has happened once in the US, and all of us survived, which was cool. So yeah, she just decided that it's best we all went to Singapore.
Tell me about your mom. What was she like, or what is she like?
My mom, she is the most capable, cool. Okay, how do I describe this? So she used to be the manager of a news network in all of Asia. For that company. Like, she wasn't like very high up there, but it's like a Western company, so it's not like, you know, she owns the whole thing. But for Asia, all of Asia, she would run all of it. So very intelligent, very capable, but also very chill, like kind of funny, I guess. I guess she's kind of funny. But like, I remember when I was in high school, I asked my mom, "Hey mom, if I came home and you caught me, like if you caught me doing drugs at home, what would you do?" I just wanted to stir the pot, you know? And my mom goes, "Well, what kind?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what kind?" She goes, "Are you talking about weed? Or are you talking about like crack? Like, it's different." I'm like, "What do you mean it's different?" She's like, "Everyone does weed, but like crack, you don't want to do crack. That she'll fuck you up." So my mom was definitely like, you know, very chill, very progressive in that way. She also was never really the type to like really push me on my studies too much. Even though she gave me a lot of puzzles in the past, she just kind of let me do what I want to do. Like, she always knew I was gonna. I went to school for graphic design. Also in high school, I did a lot of art. So she always knew I was gonna be like an artist in some sort of creative person, because I used to draw all the time as a child too. So she's like, that's Rebel. Rebel's never gonna be a doctor. She tried when I was like, I was 4, I think. My mom was born with a heart murmur. So she went, "Son, you know, your mother has a heart condition and you could save her if you became a doctor, right?" and I was like, "No, I don't." All right,
let me make this my life's journey. Yeah.
So I'm not gonna be a doctor. Someone else can do it. and she knew it was never gonna work. But yeah, she's very chill, very confident, very capable. I don't know how else to describe her. She's also very stubborn too, super stubborn. So stubborn to the point where I used to live with my I had a stepdad. They were together for like the entire time I was in Singapore and a little bit more. And they were both so stubborn that at the end of the relationship, they lived in the same house together, but didn't speak to each other for a whole year.
A whole year, literally for a whole year.
Literally a whole year. Don't talk, like not a single word to each other. And they eventually, I can't even not speak to someone for more than a day. Like that's just my. Yeah, I can't imagine. You would think that eventually you would just be like, all right, this is a waste of time. You know, like you tell them like, this is a waste of time, get out of my house, right? Like, no, my mom is so stubborn. She will, you know, be like that. So I guess like take that as you will. Like, you know, I guess stubbornness also helps her, you know, get the things she wants, or like she has a way and she'll make sure that way is like executed. So it might be a good kind of like leadership skill. I don't know. Quality.
I think there's also something that, like, I hate to generalize, but maybe Western folks don't really know as much, which is like the concept of face, right? It's like,
Oh yeah.
being proud and representing yourself in a certain way. I think your mom may also decided to not kick the person out of the house because of face, because of like wanting to uphold certain standards for herself and for her family, right? And how others perceive the family. So maybe tell me a bit about how like the concept of face has impacted you as well. Like just kind of maybe like what aspects of it have you observed from your parents on both sides?
So face is a really interesting subject because I haven't thought about face, the concept of face, in a really long time. But now that you bring it up,
I'm waiting for your face and magic essay. I'm just kidding. I haven't thought about this for a decade, honestly, before you talked about your family.
Right?
So I'm sorry for bringing this up. Yeah.
No, it's okay. It's interesting. I think face does materialize itself now that I'm having my thoughts and like connecting with all the other things. So I do think sometimes I do think about face internally when I'm thinking about, or I'm observing other, like, I guess, Chinese people like that I know of, because it's also a really interesting experience being like Asian American, because there's so many different gradations of Asian American, right? Like Sinestra and I are totally different Asian Americans. He's born and raised in Boston. Yeah, he's born and raised in Boston. Yeah, and then he went to LA, and I think he's back to Boston now. No, he's in Virginia. I'm just doxing where he lives now. It's fine. Everybody knows everything about Sinestra, so it's okay. But he's born and raised, right? And I don't think he has that strong of connections to his family beyond like the ones in the U.S. While technically I was born and raised in the U.S., but I did spend like I think 13 years in Asia, where I would fly back to see my family, basically every holiday, every break, like I would go back 4 or 5 times a year from Singapore. I also lived in Hong Kong for 3 years. So then me coming to the US, even though I'm technically Asian American, the way I experience like my Asian American experience is totally different, where we were actually talking about Killian. Do you know Killian from Strixhaven?
Yeah. What about Killian? Just being like representative, or?
Yeah. So when Killian was first released, there were a lot of people who didn't like the portrayal of Killian, because Killian's whole thing is that his father's disapproving of him. I
remember that.
Yeah, and like so I was talking with Sinestra about this, because Sinestra was also very like passionate about this as well. He really liked Killian. Killian's pretty big time, I think, in Magic, because there aren't that many like in Western media until like very recently. Asian men, you have almost no representation, or like there isn't that many aside from like Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, like the martial artist. And usually they never let the Asian martial artist be like the guy, right? It's always kind of like the guy who helps, the main character, or he's kind of funny and wacky in his own way.
The sidekick, basically, like the tonto
Rush Hour,
whoever.
Right?
Yeah.
You could argue that he wasn't a sidekick. He was, but you kind of get the idea. They're never really in the center, right? And in Magic, finally, you have Killian, who sort of is in the center. Like, you don't have a character like that looks like Killian in Magic for like a long time. We had Kamigawa, of course, but like I think there's something about Killian that a lot of Asian Americans saw and was like, fucking finally, like me in Magic. But then,
it's about time.
But then you realize, God damn it, he has the same trope that every Asian, character has, the disapproving parents, and they have to work hard and study really hard, but they're never able to connect with the parents. And Sinestra was very disappointed over it, while I was like, what's wrong with it? I don't get it. And then he had to explain to me, like, this was my experience growing up in the States here with my parents, and it's very similar to what I have. And I want to see, and I don't know if this is exactly his perspective, but like he wants to see something different, right? He doesn't want to see exactly his own experience replicated, in this
But what's
game.
wrong with a trope if it's relatable? That's the question.
So I think that's two sides of the coin, right? Like I think some people might find it relatable. Some people might be so, have such a strong experience from it in this escape for like this hobby for them. They don't want to see that again, right? They want to see something else. They want to see maybe
Like not in my hobby or not in my fantasy world.
Yeah, maybe they want to see a Killian, who actually has just parents who love him and he does well, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like if you experience that at home, you might not want to see it again in a game. But for me, like my background was completely different, and I guess like I think just our experiences are totally different. So I guess to bring it back to the whole face thing, the only times I ever think of face is when I kind of think about these kind of subjects. Is like sometimes I also think a lot about like what is Asian American identity, because my Asian identity is very different from I think a lot of other Asian American identity. Where like this sounds really dumb. I really love boba, but I think like sometimes I see people who like really like love boba and kind of make it their identity, and in my mind I think like you have like all this history and all this culture, like you come from like this rich kind of culture, and why are you making this dumb drink your identity, right?
Like the symbol of the culture in a way, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, the context I'm lacking is that you are born in another country, right? You don't have that connection. Like all that other stuff back there doesn't mean anything to you. Yeah, you're raised here and you're an American. This is like boba tea is your culture. Like it literally is, because you let's say you never go back, or you go back once or twice a year. What does that matter to you, right? Well, I went back there and I visit there a lot, so my connection there is a lot different than someone else over there. So when I think about face, it's like, like there's an element of like, to me, I feel like is a little bit of losing face when you're not like so representative of this like culture, but at the same time, I don't think it's very fair because you don't even know, like that's not really your culture. Someone can tell you that you come from a culture of warriors or whatever, but you've never experienced it. Why does it matter to you? You're born and raised in Texas,
This is so relatable right now. I hate to make the interviews about myself, but I'll just tell you real quick because you may not know. Like, I was born in Taiwan. Our family immigrated to Canada. I grew up maybe similar in terms of my parents didn't actually push us, my brother and I, to do super well academically. So the whole trope of the like overbearing tiger parent just never applied to me, even though I saw that with friends around me, right? My parents never even forced us to go to Chinese school or like do like extra tutoring for math class. They always just told us, you're just good enough. You're good enough. Just keep doing what you're doing. They would limit our video games to be like, you can only play on weekends, but we would just like cram the shit out of like video games on the weekends. So it was totally fine. And sometimes we would just like play sneakily during weekdays as long as they didn't see us, whatever, right? As kids, you learn how to break the rules. But I also feel a bit of that too. It's like, okay, I'm from Taiwan. I grew up in Canada. Now I live in mainland China. So I know for sure there is no like uniform Asian experience. In fact, I have this weird thing now where it's like, I'm almost like the token guy that my friends that are in North America will be like, hey, did you hear this thing about like Xi Jinping in China? Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about crypto in China? I'm like, I'm supposed to be the spokesperson for like mainland China, even though I'm not from here. And then it's like also this weird stuff where it's like, you live in China and then no one can, because I look like this, no one can ever accept that you are just Canadian inside. And I always have to be like, oh yeah, I'm from Taiwan and my grandparents are from Jiangsu, because like they need to know that you're from Asia. So
yeah,
that's a whole nother podcast, but it's like, I feel that so much. It's like, there is no such thing as Asian anymore. It's like, and you're from Hong Kong. You grew up in Ohio. You spent a lot of time in Hong Kong. You spent a lot of time in Singapore. So like, sure, you're Chinese, but like the thing between Hong Kong and Taiwan and China is also like super complicated, and it's like nobody wants to get like a 5-hour video essay from me on that. So it's like, how do you like break that down to somebody in like 256 characters or whatever? It's like it's impossible. Like how like we're not all the same, but it's like, and let's not even talk about like Southeast Asia and Malaysia and Indonesia.
Yeah.
It's like, but people don't know that stuff. It's like to the West, it's all just like one homogenous blob because that's how they see themselves. And I'm not saying it's like malicious, but there's just a bias there that it's very difficult to explain, right?
I had a, this is,
I'm sorry, I rambled way too much.
No,
Yeah,
no, it's
sorry.
good. Maybe we should have another session on just Asian American identity because we can go so deep on this. But I used
Honestly, that could just be a serial podcast.
Yeah.
So
I used a coworker. She's also her parents are from Hong Kong, and back when the protests were happening with like the student movement, my mom, born and raised in Hong Kong, was on the opposite side, was not on the student side. She was on the perspective of like, well, you know, unfortunately, China is the thing that supports Hong Kong now. So even though it is disappointing that you're losing freedoms or things like that, it is just what it is. You are a city in China, and eventually we're all Chinese. We should all follow the same thing, which is interesting because she's born and raised in Hong Kong. And I was talking to my coworker, and she was like, oh, my parents only, like, you know, my parents are supporting the students, and it's just like it's just even in that like that small like ecosystem, there's so much variation, right?
Yeah.
So maybe to bring it back to like the face thing, I remembered I was telling Sinestra one day, I was like, hey Sinestra, don't forget today is a Mid-Autumn Festival, so go get like your mooncakes. And he was like, oh, I forgot, like I didn't even know like that, like my parents don't really celebrate that. And my mom used to like, she would text me and be like, you didn't wish me happy Mid-Autumn Festival. And then she would call me and be like, this is your culture. You're Chinese. You can't forget this stuff. So I think when it comes to like identity and face, like I'm held to that standard, and I also have that connection. And when I see other people not having that connection, like I'm thinking like my mom is like, you should remember that. That's Mid-Autumn Festival. But Sinestra probably is like, he never celebrated that. It's not a thing in here, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's so funny too, because my family is not that traditional either. So when I was in Canada, they just didn't celebrate that stuff. It was only the last 10 years that I'm in mainland China. Now my wife reminds me like, okay, it's Mid-Autumn Festival. You should do this red envelope for, you know, your niece and all this stuff. And I'm totally into it. Like I'm not begrudging it, but it's just like, I just became this sort of like late bloomer Asian where now I'm like more traditional and I actually care about the mooncakes. But when I was I think about this a lot. It's like in a different timeline where I didn't move to mainland China, I'd just be a totally different person. And it's just like, it's wild sometimes just thinking about that. It's just so much of it is just circumstance. I don't know. There's no question here. It's just a random observation. So,
yeah, I try to latch on to like the little fragments of it in New York City, where for Mid-Autumn Festival, that's one of the few like holidays I really like celebrate. Like I will, when I was out in LA filming for game nights, actually, they have us posted in like a really Asian, like a kind of like this hotel that's near an Asian community. And across from my hotel is a little bakery. And I saw they had mooncakes. I was like, yeah, let's go. And I went in there and made sure I got all my mooncakes so then I can celebrate it properly and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So tell me how you got into content. Like, you know, you sort of mentioned like you've been playing Magic and you learned Magic and you got into Modern, but like what was the initial step into actually, because I think a part of the question is like getting into content requires being like more public about yourself. So I'm curious, like, have you always been a public person? Like how did you make that? It's almost like a mindset transition. So tell me about that.
So what's really funny is for content creation, I never considered it. Like even so, I think my first endeavor in content was on an Instagram, and some of my like older followers would know. I don't like using the word followers; it just feels so like icky. But like
Yeah.
people
Follow
who
me.
know me from a long
Yeah.
time ago would remember like I used to be really active on Instagram, and that's because I like taking pictures. I like making things, so I thought like it's kind of fun, like put on Instagram and let people look at it, and had all this type of content on there. But I never really thought of myself as a content creator. I was just like, I'm just making things. I do like I do some graphic design, and I can make some videos and I can take pictures. So like, let's see what happens. And I always thought to myself that I'll never be a YouTuber. YouTuber, like, there's so much effort. Like, there's so much time you have to put into it to make this content. You have to edit. You have to get, all this, and then make sure you look nice and have a camera, all yada yada. And then eventually, on Instagram, I started making these 1 minute long CDH games. Because Instagram has a 1 minute video limit for how long a video can be. So I was thinking, I wonder if there's a way I could portray a whole game in a minute. So each video was a minute long, and there's no words. It's just you see cards tapping and moving and stuff like that, and people loved it because you can actually see how the game was being played, and the game would end in a minute. But that would take me like 5 hours, just very carefully untapping, tapping every little thing, and designing the whole thing. Then eventually I was like, I'm gonna spend all this time making that. Maybe like I can make a YouTube video. But what?
Oh, hold up. What made you even want to do those 1 minute videos? There must be some motivation there, because you went from just documenting your life to doing something that's quite orchestrated, right? Like 5 hours to make a minute of video. So what was was there some kind of inner push?
I don't know if you can tell, my push for most things is me seeing something that seems difficult, or there's a puzzle there, and I don't want to see if I could do it. And that's always been kind of like the driving force of everything I do. Like, can I play a good Widowmaker? Let's see if we can do that. Can you actually do a minute, like portray a whole Commander game in a minute? No idea. I never really made a gameplay video before. I don't really watch that many gameplay videos before, but I have some design skills, and I have like my software. So let's see what happens. And that's kind of it. Like it wasn't really thinking about like, I mean, at that time I was also helping my friend Alan with his Instagram account too. So I'd write all these jokes and design all these things. I'll be like, oh, this is a cool idea, you should do that. But I never thought of myself a content creator. And then I just thought like, no one gets to see games on Instagram. Like it's just not a platform for it. And I just wanted to know. And I did it, and it was cool. So I kept doing it. And then even at that point, it wasn't like a switch to like, oh, I'm going to go make content. There was like another thing that eventually pushed me there, but that's kind of the beginnings of...
It's like a self-challenge. It's an internal challenge for yourself. Like, can I break this, or can I like create this new paradigm? It sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. That's everything. Everything I do is always about challenging something and seeing if I can do something that's very difficult.
So tell me how you go from the 1 minute videos, and obviously there's a lot of good reactions or feedback to it from the people who watched it, but how do you go deeper into content from that point on?
So I started playing, at that time I was playing more CEDH online, because at that point it was like during the pandemic when everyone's locked down. So I was playing this before Spell Table. We were playing on this, I don't remember what this thing was called, but like, online in a Zoom kind of like conference call things we were playing. And I was making a little bit of content because I was like, well, if I'm at that point so connected to the community and like starting to learn the meta better and starting to learn all this stuff better, maybe people will want to like actually want to consume that content, right? So I would write like kind of monthly CDH trends, just like very simple slideshows of like, this is what I noticed is happening and stuff like that. And I kept just thinking about like, would people be interested in this? It wasn't it's weird because I'm making content for people to consume, and obviously like getting engagement is a good thing. But at that point, I still wasn't thinking of myself as the content creator. It was just more like I have this knowledge and I have this design skill. So let's see what happens, right? Let's just keep making things and see what happens. I still didn't really consider. I just consider myself as like individual and not like a content creator. And the first YouTube video I made was actually, I don't remember specifically why I wanted to make a YouTube video, but this was when I was hanging out with Sinestro a lot more, and he made this variation of a very good CEDH deck called Blue Farm, which our friend River May Cry, this Finnish guy, made. There's a whole epic there. Sinestro made a variation of it called Freeze Thief, and it's very funny because it's like 5 or 6 cards different. Very different deck.
It's like a vintage deck. You change 2 cards and it's like a brew, right?
Whole different archetype. So he made Freeze Thief, and I just decided, like, again, like the 1 minute gameplay thing. I was thinking, you know what, this deck is really good. I want to challenge myself to be a better player. I'm going to try this deck out, and I've never seen a video where the person who made the deck is coaching me in a game. So this is the idea of the content. It's my very first video. You can still find it. It's 2.5 hours long. It's called Spiky Spirit Guides, and the concept is that I am with the brewer or the expert of the deck, playing that deck at its absolute worst nightmare scenario, which is to balance out the me having a coach behind me playing against 3 very good players on these decks, that making a pot that.
Oh, so it's a real, like, your back is against the wall and you're against all odds, if you will, and like, because you have a coach to somehow mitigate that.
Yeah, so Sinestro was there with me, and we would like kind of like play together. We would talk together a little bit and like try and get ourselves out of that game, or like win that game, right? And that video originally was like 4 hours long because the game itself was 3 hours, and I edited it down to 2.5, and kind of like the 1 minute thing. It wasn't so much that I wanted to make like a gameplay video. It's just I haven't seen something like this before, so I want to see what happens. Because I know at the time for CEDH, the community is so small. It still is like small, but it's a lot larger now, and the content consumption is just like very low. Just unless if you're play to win, playing a power, or other very established channels like Lab Maniacs, your ability to like really do well in that space, I think is very difficult back in the day. So there was no aspiration to be like, this is going to jumpstart my content creation career. It was really just like, I have Sinestra, we're kind of funny, let's play together, learn to show people what this deck is about, and show it at its absolute worst nightmare position with really good players. And afterwards we talk about it together and learn, and let me and the audience learn about the deck and learn from that game. And that video is actually really special to me because when I made that video and I posted it, all these people jumped into Discord, and we had a live watch session together. People sat down for 2 and something hours, and we watched the whole video together, start to finish, which is just like, asking people to watch something for 10 minutes is already a lot. They sat through almost a Lord of the Rings movie. and it was such a good time because we're all sitting there like laughing, like, oh look, here's Braden playing the thing and whatever. So it was like a really good time making that video and watching it. But that was the first YouTube video, and I think after how that was received, it wasn't like super well received in terms of metrics, but like in my community, it was very well received, right? So I was like, all right, what's the next video I can make? And then it kept going from there, where I made all these really weird videos. I don't know if you ever looked at like my earlier work. Like my videos are generally very weird, but my earliest videos were like super weird. Like, for example, I did a tournament. I think my first proper piece of content was my tournament report. So I played in a tournament. I top 16 with my pet deck. And the introduction of that video was me going like this. It was wait, what was it? It was basically me calling Sheldon and saying, and okay, actually, I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember what I did. There's one video. Okay, I remember what this is now. We can cut all that stuff. This video was Opposition Agent came out, and Opposition Agent basically kind of kills my deck. My deck is Sisay with Gigantha, and it activates Sisay to find a legendary. So with the printing of Opposition Agent, you can imagine, oh no, Sisay is dead. So I would in that video I would call Sheldon with my phone and be like, hey Sheldon, there's Opposition Agent, and then it would immediately cut to, wait, what? My deck's bad. My deck wasn't that good in the first place. I think that card's legal. And then I would like then try to call Gavin and stuff like that. So it's like very like weird.
It's very skit
yeah,
like, if that's
because I also really like SNL and stuff like that. So then after that video, Shivam really likes this video. So Shivam saw this video where within the same spoiler season, maybe a couple days afterwards, they printed Jeweled Lotus. And Jewel Lotus changes everything, because Jewel Lotus, is a free ritual for 3 and Sisay's 3 mana, right? So that even though there's a printing of Opposition Agent, I also get a little faster. So I made a black and white video where I'm mourning, my deck in French. I don't even speak French. I use Google Translate to do all that. I'm speaking bad French with it's black and white with the yellow subtitles with the black outlines. And it's the video is called the Jewel Lotus, I think. And that was it.
Yeah, even that sounds like a foreign movie, like the title of a foreign film or something. Yeah.
So in my earlier work, it was all stuff like that, just me responding to something in the CEDH community that I thought would bring a lot of joy to people, because this is funny, it's not necessarily the most competitive content out there, but I just thought for CEDH back in the day, there just wasn't that much content like this. I didn't see my community that I interact with on Discord and online just being reflected out there. Our jokes aren't out there, so why not just make those videos, right? To me, my jokes at the time were this is only funny to 5 people, but those 5 people are going to love it. And that's what I wanted to do. I don't want to make the stuff that, more people would enjoy. I really wanted to make the thing that my friends would really like. And that's kind of what got me further into content creation.
Because it's just a space for experimentation, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're just, I don't love this term, but kind of just throwing stuff at the wall, and even if it doesn't stick, you sort of enjoy throwing it, so it's fine, right? And it entertained the 5 other friends that you have, and I think that's what you're supposed to do. I feel like you're describing the purity of content creation, which is in the beginning you don't care, but then that's before all the evil metrics and all the stuff comes into play, and then now you do care because you have a little bit more. Well, I shouldn't assume that. Maybe you're still very much because I feel like you're still pushing a lot of the, to use a lofty term, the avant-gardeness of content. Because when I look at your stuff now, even it's not always the same. It's not always okay, Rebel is in front of the camera speaking for 10 seconds, and we go into the same intro and the same pan of the shot. In fact, with some of the recent stuff you're doing, you're really pushing the boundaries, but I think it's also really cool because in a way you sort of developed a brand about yourself, which is expect the unexpected. So it's people are not coming to your stuff expecting exactly the same thing. Nothing against some of those channels like Game Nights, but they have a very established formula and they know it works to the nth degree, and they just next week that video is going to be exactly like the one that you watched the week before, and that's totally fine. I'm also not saying that they don't innovate. They're always tweaking things, but I think their main framework is kind of there, whereas
It's
you're just always like a new adventure kind of thing. So
yeah, they have the mastery of their craft, right? Their innovation is like when you're very good at a deck, you're tweaking the little,
you're squeezing an extra 1% out of it every week. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
While the way I am currently creating content is just a different thing, right? Like I'm definitely not anywhere near the skill in a lot of things, like compared to game nights, right? But that also gives me the space to just do whatever I want. And I think that is like something I've always wanted to tell other content creators a lot. It's like the metric part, the numbers, and once you get a little bit more successful, I mean, like I only have 4,000 subscribers on YouTube, so it's not like successful, right? I think once you start embarking on this journey of being content creator, this is for you too. It's like it's just recognizing like how defeating, like it's very valid to chase that high of wanting bigger numbers, right? It's very valid to look at other people and see like, oh, they're doing really well, I should do that thing, or feel down when your content isn't performing well and you're like, why didn't it do that well? Like I put a lot of effort into this. Why isn't this? And I think it's just important to recognize like all that stuff is very valid feelings and very valid fears, but you should always just also try to like, this sounds really cheesy, but like stay true to who you are and make content that you like, right? Because content is like it's an endurance game. It's about staying consistent. And it's about finding ways that you can stay most consistent without burning yourself out. Because technically I can make 2 or 3 videos a week, but I also want to reserve a lot of spare time for myself, which is why I don't stream a lot. That's just the rhythm that I'm comfortable with, and I'm okay with. I'm happy accepting that my path to like getting more subscribers could be slower, but I'll be more consistent, right? My mental health will be better, and I can keep grinding this game, because to me, content creation is all about endurance. If you put too much like on your plate, eventually you just burn out. And trying to catch up after like taking a break is so much harder than like just staying consistent.
Absolutely. And I mean, fuck, man, I would kill to have 4,000 subscribers on YouTube. Like, I started 40 days ago. I have just under 200, and I am just looking at my numbers, even though I'm like a small fry, the smallest of small fries. And I have those same doubts too. Like, I did a vlog about, quarantining with COVID, and it actually had more views than like an interview video. I'm just like, do I have to pivot and talk about myself and do other stuff? And I just don't know. Like, I'm gonna just tell you, even though I'm doing this podcast part-time, I've definitely felt burnout. Not with YouTube specifically, but at certain parts of the year, it was just like I think you're touching on something which is really resonating with me, which is like, you got to find a way to make it like long-term and sustainable. Because when I'm doing this right now, I'm looking at you, we're having this, I think it's a really nice conversation. I live for this shit, right? But it's all the other stuff, like editing and putting it together, and like, doing 2 shorts a week, and like figuring out, should I do a 3rd one? I mean, I'm doing this part-time. It's not a living, but I love it so much. And it's just, I have problems drawing boundaries, because like, I'm in the shower, I'm like, I want to do this other idea. I want to do this feature. Like, that's why I had episodes about like Ukrainian magic. And I know we had talked about like EDH in China. Like, can I do like a documentary series on that? Because it's very like on theme, but it's just like, where do I find the time and the energy? Like, I'm already doing an episode a week. So it's like, and I'm doing YouTube now, which is not like, for my standards, not insignificant to have the video aspect of it. So like, I have so many problems drawing boundaries, is what I'm saying.
And I think a lot of people, like, that is a totally natural like occurrence with content creation. Once you're in the grind, every spare moment is like, I could be making a deck tech right now. I could be making a deck right now. Why am I not recording? If I recorded this and post this next week, maybe it's another couple more
Or
subscribers.
if I'm playing a video game, why am I not streaming it, right? Yeah.
Yes. Like every little once you start kind of like turning like you start making content, everything could be content, and it totally can eat up your life. So I think it's so important for you to like just accept, like, you know what? This is what's right for me. Maybe 2 shorts is too much. We'll do 1 and we'll live with it. We'll live with the fact that we might not hit, I'm not saying you won't, but like we might not hit 1,000 by end of the year, right? That's fine, because you're still happy with what you're doing, and you're still comfortable with like, you know, your life, right? I would imagine, you know, if you take the harder route of really, really grinding and spend like squeezing every moment to try and reach that success, once you reach that stepping stone, you might not even be ready to hit, you know, go to 2,000, right? Like, or the next whatever hurdle is. And I know a lot of people are experiencing that, and I have to tell them, like, you have to, at a certain point, you have to kind of like make that call. How important is content creation to you? Do you really want it to be your job? Because if you do, you have to treat it like your job. You have to create boundaries and a set time to be like, I stop working, right? Content is my work. I'm done filming my video. I'm going to go play a game. I'm not going to record that shit. I'm just going to play for the sake of it, and I'm going to keep recording tomorrow once I get it, right? It's like a startup business, and a lot of what I do for my content, the strategy I use in it is also like it's a lot from a lot of my experience working with startups as like a designer or UX designer or whatever, right? Is that as a startup, you're wearing all the hats, right? You're the editor, you're the interviewer, you're the producer, right? You're finding the people, coordinating the time, you're doing everything, right? And in the first year of any startup, it's maybe the first couple of years, it's gonna be the worst, because it's just basically a very strapped team trying to do everything, and it's going to eat everything from you. But it should be very satisfying, because that's the thing you wanted to do. This is the job you wanted, and this is the thing you want to create, right? But thankfully, this isn't your job. This is just content. This is a thing you're supposed to be doing to enjoy yourself. So if you understand that and accept that, you're like, you know what? We could take it a little easier. Maybe we don't have to do like 3 streams a week. Maybe 2 is fine, and have a nice day off. But if you do want it to be your job, then you also need to create that like very strict like boundaries, which I have that with like Alan knows I have a very like strict schedule, which is,
This is Alan of the Mental Misplay.
yeah, because he's always trying to get me on to like go on a stream, and I'm like, I'm not going to go on that stream, because I told you I don't go on streams on Fridays. That's my thing. That's one of my days off. So like I'm very, very strict with like, if I spend like 2 days, I generally spend like 2 or 3 evenings, an hour or 2 working on content, and all the other time is no content at all. That's just my schedule.
So you got like content day or content evening.
Yeah. So if let's say today is content day, right? We're having an interview. So I knew Thursday is going to be my content day. So I'm probably just going to not do content for the other days. I did something, like I edited a video, but like I left 3 other days open, and it flexes. It's just, I'm very, very rigid about how much time I spend on my content, because I know that just works for me.
What was your process for figuring that out?
My process was just realizing like, at some point it was just impacting every part of my life, that I was just constantly editing, constantly like thinking about new ideas, constantly just doing stuff, that I never had any downtime. And also streaming a lot more, because this was back when I was a lot less well known. So there's also that drive to be like, oh, I want people to know who I am. I want to go on all the streams. I want to play. I want people to know I'm good at Magic and blah, blah, blah. And if I go on this stream, maybe this stream is going to be the stream that makes me the 5,000 subscriber,
I got to take as many shots as possible,
exactly.
etc. Right.
That little voice just keeps trying to get you to do stuff. And eventually I was just like, shit, I don't want to do this like all the time. I figured. So this is the other, I think, thing I tell people sometimes too. I would go to Magic Fest and people will now come up to me, which is kind of a cool experience, and they'd be like, "Oh, A lot of them are like, I have a new channel, and like, what's your tip, like for a new content creator like me?
What's your advice, basically?
What's your advice, right?"
Yeah.
And I would tell them the same advice I told you, which is, the making time for yourself, but also being realistic with how much time you're investing, right? So that first video I made with Sinestra, it took me 3 months to make, because I was literally cutting every single piece of dialogue, cutting all the cutting all the space out in After Effects. As I told you earlier before this interview started, that's not where you're supposed to be doing that. And I was like carefully trying to make sure every little thing was perfect. And the next couple videos were, they were easier videos, but it was like that chase for perfection, right? I want to make the absolute best piece of content ever. But I realized eventually, if I want, like, I have to basically accept that I want a certain quality and I can't have perfection if I want to have like a consistent output and also have enough time for myself. So for example, a lot of my videos now, some of them are somewhat formulaic, like the deck text, what else do I do? I think deck text is the best example, because that follows a very, very like a consistent structure. I have an intro, I have a deck list, then I have the goldfishing to show what the deck does, then the ending, right? And there's some editing involved, but the editing is by design. The format is simple for me to knock out within a week without spending too much effort. And of course, I could have spent a lot more time making everything better, but the trade-off is I might not be making content today. So that's just like, I think that's an important thing for a lot of content creators who do a lot of editing and stuff like that. It's just like accepting that you're never going to have perfection. So maybe just accept, like, find what quality you want, and then like optimize your process to get to as close as an acceptable quality, so you can keep making things and innovating on stuff that matters, as opposed to like making sure every is cut out of the dialogue, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been sort of living what you're saying. I feel like there's a common trajectory for content creators. Like, we all kind of go through variations of this. I also want to go back to something that I talked to your friend Sinestra about, or not going back, because I mean, it's not like I'm just saying, going back to, because this is what Sinestra told me. I don't know the best way to ask this as a question, but just relating it to you. He said that you were originally very shy on the CEDH Discord. You didn't want to put your face on camera. You didn't want to reveal your voice. Like, you wanted to type. Mm-hmm. And then he was really surprised when you volunteered to do his Brew versus Meta series.
Brew, yeah.
Meta versus Brew, because he was just like, here's a person that I'm kind of like shooting the shit with on Discord, and obviously is really into CEDH, but how do you go from that shy rebel to, like, I'm now in front of the camera and I'm volunteering for projects? Like, what shifted for you?
So this is I think a very, I don't know how consistent of experiences this is, but it has to do with like my trans identity, right? It has to do with my voice. So the first thing is like, if I introduce myself online as she, they, and then I go on the microphone like, hey, I'm Rebel, like it might be jarring. And the very real fear that people are just gonna not, be mean about my voice and stuff like that. And I also actually have like a somewhat long history of being anxious of my voice even before I decided to transition. I just always thought my voice sounded like, people told me the way I talk is like a little sing-songy, a little like nasally, a little whatever, right? And I've just been always very self-conscious about my voice. So I was just also literally transitioning at that period when I was playing CEDH, that I just wasn't comfortable going on the microphone as comfortably as other people would be, because I don't want them to hear the voice that I have. Because at the time I was just practicing, also like how to feminize my voice or find the voice that I like and stuff like that. So it was just very difficult for me to like get on the microphone and do that. And then eventually, do you know who Brayden is?
Yeah, Brayden is someone in the MTG community. Is he?
Yes.
Does do stuff for SCG?
Yes, he does. He used to. Yeah, he started off doing CEDH content. We knew each other from a Magic Fest, Magic Fest or Command Fest in New Jersey, a long time ago, and he was just this guy who made a podcast along with comedian MTG, Ian, who also does CEDH, and we were in the same service together. And I mean, now he's doing stuff for SEG, which is super cool. He's making their content there, super excited for him. But he was just like, I don't know, just like do it. Like he's like just hop, like you're talking with me right now. Just get on the microphone. Like, I don't know, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? If someone's a dickhead, like I'll tell them to shut up. Like, so Brayden actually, for this, my whole like experience online is like so critical to me actually being like out there, because he was the guy who was just like, I don't know, dude, just do it. And then for Meta versus Brew, this is like I think a very consistent experience with a lot of other CH players. When you have your pet deck, you want to make sure the world knows your pet deck is good, right? So when someone is like, you know, when there's an opportunity to prove myself, not only did I top 16, now I need to make sure the people who saw me play the top 16 deck can win against like whatever decks, which is like, again, that need to prove myself, of finding something very difficult and being like, I could do it. So that's kind of like the two things colliding together and then making content that way. If you listen to me, and I mean, you don't have to, but if you went back to Spiky Spirit Guides and listened to how I talk to now, totally different. Like you can hear like there's absolutely no confidence in that voice, and I was so soft spoken. And then eventually I was just like, I found the voice I liked, and it sounds, even like my earlier videos I was talking about, I sound totally different from what I sound like now, actually, because now my voice went back to deeper. Before it was like a lot higher, I think, in like around here, but I just got a lot more comfortable talking here, and this is just the voice I'm used to. So I'm just more.
How hard is it to train your voice? I mean, I've heard about people going through it, but it seems like impossible to me because I never tried.
I don't think I've like nailed it yet, and I've actually thought about going to a voice like coach to like improve that. But there's one something I also really wanted to do as part of my earlier content was, there's like very few trans people like in Magic content, right? And the very first time I think I showed myself, the very first joke I did, like showed out my face, right? Spiky Spirit Guides didn't have my face, I was just my voice. And maybe there's a video after that, but it doesn't matter. This particular video about Opposition Agent, the joke was, I go, hey Sheldon, this is Rebel. So you might have heard this card, Opposition Agent, came out. Wait, what? So like the switch in the voice, where the joke in that the trans person is so shocked that they went back to their dude voice. It's very funny, right?
Moment of stress, and it just happens, yeah.
And the point of doing that, and I never like shared this with people, is that I know a lot of trans people are so, like myself, is so self-conscious about letting that voice escape when it's just part of you. And of course, you know, if you don't want people to hear it, you don't have to, but at the same time, I don't think you should be super ashamed of it, because it's just who you are. So I wanted to like make that joke, because I also just wanted, like, I don't think there's a lot of humor out there, or like there's a lot of displays of trans people out there where you're accepting of the thing you're trying to hide, which is that dude voice, where I'm like, what?
That's so hard, because obviously I didn't go through the same experience as you, but it seems so hard to have to close a part of yourself while having to open another part of yourself. Like, I know that's like a gross generalization, but like the cognitive gymnastics or like what you have to do just seems super hard. Or I just want people to have more empathy towards that, because like that's just a whole nother level of ball game that most people don't have to go through. It just seems so tough.
I think it's the analogy is like you've always been there wearing this suit, and it's not so much that you're switching, but it's like you're coming out of the suit, but sometimes the suit kind of closes back up on you again. And you're not used to, being out, in any expression of that phrase.
Mm. When did you realize, I mean, I guess you're saying you always knew who you were, but like when was there like a turning point when you realized like I needed to transition, or this is who I really am and I want to show this in publicly visible ways to myself and to others?
So I knew I was trans when I was like 10, a really long time ago. I don't know why. I remember I was in Singapore and I was just like thinking to myself, I don't think I'm a dude. I just don't think, like, it just doesn't feel right to me. Never did. And then for a long time I thought about it that way. And then I even told my mom in high school. So this is in Beijing, actually this is in Beijing, where I was like, hey mom, I'm trans. And she's like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then we talked about it. And then I thought about transitioning when I was in New York, but then somehow I just didn't do it. I was just like, you know what? Maybe I'm not.
Were you scared, or was it something else?
I think it was just afraid that I've lived this life to this comfort, to whatever. I've
like, why rock the boat, right?
Exactly. Why rock the boat? Because who knows? Like, what if when I come out, I'm super ugly, and then everyone hates me, and then like everyone just makes fun of me all the time, and I get super depressed, and like I'll never, look the way I feel. So yeah, after college, I was just like, you know what? Maybe I'm just a dude. and then right before the pandemic happened, I went, I tried out cosplay, and I wanted to cosplay Mordred. So I don't know if you watch anime, right? Do you know?
I'm not up to date with it, unfortunately.
Okay. Do you know the Fate series, Fate Stay Night?
I've heard of it, but I have not watched it.
So do you know the premise of Fate Stay Night?
No, you have to fill me in.
Okay, I will fill you in. I'll fill you in with the how it's relevant to this discussion. Fate Stay Night is about basically these mages who fight a holy grail war to win the holy grail to make a wish, and how they fight it is by they summon hero or legends of the past. So for example, King Arthur or like Gilgamesh of Babylon, and they all fit under like fantasy classes. So like every grail war, there's a berserker, a saber, a caster, a lancer, an archer, an assassin. And I say berserker, it doesn't matter. But essentially there's classes, you always get one of each. And the character I really, really liked, I used to really like Gilgamesh, which might be red flags to some people, but I really liked Mordred. So Mordred is like the son of King Arthur, and Mordred is such a cool character. And I was thinking like, I really want to cosplay Mordred. So I bought the wig, and I was like, I don't know, like if I could pull it off, maybe I'd do some makeup. And then I used a phone app or an app on my phone called B612, and it's just like a selfie app, and you can apply filters to yourself. It's like any other, filter like camera app these days. And remember, I tried it on myself, and I was like, hey, I think I could pull it off. So that gave me the confidence to like, maybe it's worth trying. And then over pandemic, thankfully, because I didn't have to go outside to meet people, I could just like grow out my hair and like try out all the things I wanted to try out, like makeup and stuff like that. And not worry about people at work being like, why is your hair so long and stuff like that? You know, like when you're going from short hair to like long hair, there's a period where that hair just doesn't look good. Like when it's just this long, it just looks like you just haven't cut your hair. You have to wait a little longer until it looks purposeful. But yeah, like I think actually I imagine this is the same thing for a lot of like other trans people, just being able to have a lot more time to yourself and reflect on who you are just gave you the space to like go in your cocoon and then come out as a butterfly.
That's awesome. So I guess the content kind of, it's not really connected, but
It is.
the timing wise, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's not. I
Okay,
think
so
somewhat is connected, and I think it's part of the challenge too. Like on the theme of like challenging myself with the impossible, right? I wanted the challenge as well of like, if people accept me, you know, through my content, it validates who I am and my gender.
Yeah, it's a total validation package. I get that. Is that why you decided to go the VTuber route, or maybe initially you did, right?
So the VTuber route is actually really depressing. As funny as the VTuber is so I would post a lot of videos. This is before the VTuber. I post a lot of videos on Reddit, and everybody knows if you post your videos on Reddit, you usually get downvoted. But I was thinking, like, is it because they just don't want to see my face? Like they just don't want to see, you know, my face. So then I decided to use the VTuber as like a way to not, you know, to raise engagement. It's really messed up. Also at the time, I was reading about VTubers, like the software and stuff like that. And I was thinking like, is this something I could do? Let's see if I could do it. And I did. So then I just started making the videos, and I was thinking, how funny would it be if it was like an AI, right? And then I figured out how to like, I thought about how to do the voice, what kind of character I wanted to be, and then I designed the AI, and then designed the character. And it's the AI is just so much fun to like actually play with, because the AI there's so much space you have to tell like creative or funny stories. Yeah.
Why is that? Is it just because there's another representation of you that they can do that, or because the AI can do interesting visual or audio effects? Or I don't quite understand.
It's everything. So from like a production standpoint, right? I don't have to put on makeup. I don't do anything. I could look as ugly as I want, but then the webcam with the VTuber, it's gonna solve everything. I don't even need a green screen, because it's just I can design. My character can be in any background I want, wear any outfit I want, be it with any character I want, and look good. Because if let's say I want to be next to Urza in a skit, what am I going to do? Get a green screen here and then like have this bad webcam where I'm all fuzzy and stuff and have like a nice like Urza? It just doesn't work the same way. From a production standpoint, the VTuber just simplifies everything, because I can design everything, throw the design there, put the VTuber there, and hit record on OBS, and I'm good. But from like a storytelling perspective, I think it's harder for an audience to suspend their disbelief when they see like an in-person character, right? Like, unless if there's a lot of budget like Command Zone, and you're able to edit that well to like create that world so that people will believe it, it's very difficult, I think, for people to like buy the story you're trying to tell. So when I have an AI, when I have this 3D model moving around and the VTuber and the AI and stuff like that, you're immediately like, oh, okay, this is the story. Like, I believe the story. You believe it, right? Like, you just accept that this is an artificial intelligence. It talks. It has pink hair. It stutters, and it's gonna do wacky things. And sometimes, it talks this way and has all these like mannerisms. and then I can tell any story I want that fits like the lore or whatever, because you just accept it, right?
I get you. So how do you reconcile Rebel the AI or the VTuber persona versus this? Because when I go look at your YouTube channel, the intro video still has the AI. So
Yeah,
like,
well,
how do you decide like which videos are using what persona? I'll just use persona. Maybe that's not the right word, but like, how do you make those creative choices? Let's say.
so the AI, as I said, because I find the things that let's say the persona does the best, right? The AI tells stories, like funny stories or creative stories, very, very well. And also, I'm like thematically tying the AI to information. So deck text or whatever, you can see the correlation between the AI doing that, right? The person does the more human side of the content, the things that wants to create human connection. So, for example, Untitled, I mean, the whole point of Untitled is to be in person, so of course it's gonna be me, right? But the new strategy series I have, I have two strategy series. I have one that's Rebel AI Commander Schools, and I have me just like a vlog of me talking about just in-depth Magic theory, right? They're both essentially the same thing. The execution is different, but also the intent is different. The Rebel AI, this one is just more informational and more educational, while the strategy series is more about my personal journey as a person learning Magic.
That's the divide.
And then when you're watching me talk about it and think it through, it's supposed to connect you as like, we're both people just trying to learn how to play Magic, right? When you're watching Rebel AI, you're not necessarily thinking like, oh, we have the same thing. No, you're watching, a character tell you something versus creating that connection. So when I first had Rebel AI, a lot of my content was all Rebel AI, and I consciously thought of like, I can't let the whole channel be just Rebel AI, even as fun as it would be, because I think there's an important part, just, I don't know, to the brand or whatever, where people still know there's a person. So I do think about it in terms of scheduling and also content type of making sure that there's somewhat equal representation of both.
That's absolutely brilliant, because I actually don't think there's anybody else. I mean, we're all unique, right? But there's nobody else in MTG that's doing that sort of like that difference of persona. It's usually just one persona, and it might just be the person in real life, like cranked up to 11, but it's never like that delineation, if you will. Like, that's just brilliant. There's no question here about it. And it just makes sense, like, because you're doing different types of content, and it's like a visual way to just demarcate what that content is going to be. Like, literally, someone like watching the video for the first few seconds, like their mind will just make that connection without you having to explain, oh, today I'm going to do a more like academic style video. Today, this is going to be me like just talking about how I feel about something. Like, how did you come up with that? Like, it just came to you like one day in a eureka moment, or what?
Well, I mean, I do like some business strategy as a UX like designer director. So I think like a lot of business strategy and stuff like that, and content marketing and strategies, just things I also employ in like what I do and the content I create. There's like a lot more planning and a lot like I do like actually sit down and think about like, well, for this piece of content I'm creating, what is the value? What is my strategy in terms of like this year? What do I want to make? There's a lot. I do treat it somewhat like a business, and I solve all problems somewhat like I do with work, which is how I actually kind of met Sheldon, sort of, because I just reached out to him.
Is it Sheldon Memory of the famous grandfather creator of Commander? Yeah.
The creator of Commander, where I just reached out to him and I was like, do you have user personas of the Commander like players like that of things? Because I solve everything kind of like the same way. Like I try and understand what the problem is, and then like kind of create a map of it, and then like document everything, and then see trends and all that stuff, right? So it's just to tie back to my content. It's the same thing. Like I think from the outside, when you look at my content, it's like it's janky, right? Like the quality of it is purposely janky, but there's actually a lot of thought and strategy like employed, not in a like a deceiving way, but in a way that like I do plan this stuff and
Intentional,
also, yeah,
I
I
think is the word.
intentionally think about like all these things. I think also it's part of my personality where I just like everything. I just want to make everything and experience everything, which is why like I wouldn't say it was like a purposeful like planning of having like, you know, the Rebel AI and then the Rebel like, you know, separation and all that planning. It's just I wanted to make this content. So how do I make it make sense? How do I make it work for me? And that's also kind of like, I guess, a theme of what I do in content creation is like, how do I strategize everything I do so I make the content work for me, even though I'm working like on it myself, right? I'm strategically picking what quality I want to make it and what part, like how I want to represent something in a way that doesn't take my life away.
Yeah, to make it manageable or sustainable. Yeah. So tell me a bit more about Untitled, because I mean, this is something that you're breaking new ground here, but I want to hear in your own words, like just your vision and kind of the whole purpose behind the project, and you know, from idea in your head to execution.
So Untitled has been a thing I always wanted to do for like a really, really long time. When I first made content for Alan of Mental Misplay on Instagram, I used to like, when we started playing Magic, I used to just start recording on my phone when something funny is happening and I make like a funny little thing. But what I really liked about those videos is that it felt so immersive and personal where like, you know, we're seeing a moment of this game and there's a very emotional human connection to the game there. And in my mind, I always wanted that for a whole game. I want to figure out how to do that. And I thought about it for months and months and months. And I would think about like, do I use a GoPro? I need lighting, and then I need to get like overhead and all this stuff. And then one day I was just like, shit, I'm just going to use my phone. I'm just going to start recording and we'll see what happens. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And it works. It worked really well. And every episode I film, I get better and better at that process. And the idea behind Untitled originally is just every Commander gameplay channel or every representation of Commander gameplay to me never truly evoked the feeling of being in an LGS, right? And like I really wanted to, yes, literally being there, like having like the sounds of the blender in the background, like drowning out your audio, because as a video product, it's just bad, right? Like conceptually, it just doesn't make sense for you to do that. And Untitled is basically an experimentation in how far can I divorce the game and people will still pay attention to the story? Because in my mind, if you're watching a Commander game, like you can boot up any Commander game on YouTube right now and watch it. You don't need to watch the board. You can just listen to it and you might be good enough, because a lot of it is just like overhead with cards, and then like you have to watch everything, and eventually, if you're like me, you lose attention because my attention span is very, very small, right? So the experimentation there is like, I want to represent the feeling of being there, and I also want to experiment. What if you never even saw the board? What if you're there for the people, right? What if just seeing the people and seeing what they're saying and seeing what they're doing, you're able to actually track the story better by seeing that than actually seeing the game, right? And I think that experiment, like, it's true. So in the future, I will be adding some more overhead, so it's easier to see that stuff. But essentially, that's what Untitled is. It's all an experiment to represent or show these really human and honest moments of Magic, in terms of who the players are, where people play and how it's experienced. And the way I've pitched Untitled, so I'm redoing Untitled, sort of. I'm trying to improve it. And how I've pitched it to people is that it's not just going to be CEDH. The value of Untitled is I can go literally anywhere I want, tell any story I want, and show people authentically in a way that no other show can do. I mean, anyone could do it. Technically, it's just, on a phone. Anyone could do it. But what I'm getting at is I'm able to tell a story like I meet Alex Ullman of the Popper RC down in Carroll Gardens to eat a pizza, talking about Popper for a little bit. Then we're going to play a Popper game outside that pizza store. And you're able to learn so much within that sequence of who this person is, how they're playing Magic,
right,
where we're playing Magic, and what is even the New York scene of Magic, right? And the magic behind this phone is that a lot of people, when they're sitting, I think from a structural standpoint, this is very difficult for people to connect to as an audience. When I'm here doing this, and also when you're playing the game and there's a camera over here, it's hard to be yourself. When I bust out this phone, first of all, everyone knows how to use this phone and everyone knows how to behave in front of this phone because everyone has been filmed on a phone before. So suddenly they're no longer an actor. They're just who they are. And you can tell by the way, like,
they can be more natural because of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can tell just by the people who play on Untitled, there's never a moment where people are just like, oh, I'm on content. They don't even see it. They don't even remember it. That's like the magic behind like Untitled, is that we've broken the structure of filming and broken the structure of that content creation so far that I'm able to tell these stories in such an authentic way that a lot of other structures aren't currently able to do. And what I want to do is like, the Alex Ullman thing is very cool, but also like, I really want to represent, players that might not be represented on a lot of other like Magic content, right? Like I want to get trans players. I want to get like people of color on the show. And it's not just for representation's sake, but I'm honestly able to show them in a comfortable place and show who they are and not like show like this polished version that
there's not that
about.
Additional layer of artifice, which is like,
yeah. I'm able to show them as a person when the audience will be able to also connect with them as a person, which I think is like absolutely massive as like a platform, right? Mm-hmm. So that's Untitled. I think about it a lot.
That's great. I almost think like there could be another name for a project. Like I know you're calling it Untitled, but it could also be, for me, it just sounds like it's unfinished, and unfinished is actually a good thing, right? Because this is kind of like a creative collective. I'll use a really bad example. Like when I watched the Animatrix, it was like in that world, but every episode was like a different aesthetic. It was created by somebody different. So I could also imagine like this being sort of a perpetually unfinished project where every episode you could be experimenting with some new point of view or new way to tell the story. So you could have Alex and the pizza in one episode. Another episode, you could have someone literally just like waking up from their bed and just like going from their bedroom to the game store and like talking about how am I feeling about my deck and like becoming a kind of journal. So I think there's a kind of like deliberate unformedness or deliberate chaos to it, which I think is like really appealing, because I think obviously at the end of the day it's about the people. Like Magic is just a backdrop. And now you're talking about creating a narrative that isn't just the gameplay itself, but actually going back to the people where the focus should be. Like in the past with commentary or coverage and productions, there's a very like elementary way to do it, which is like, here's a cue card that says this person, top aided this many pro tours and like his nickname or her nickname is whatever. And it's like, is that the personality? Like, that's not the personality, because we're all so much more complicated than that. So now you're like following somebody. It's like, it's more like a Casey Neistat or like a vlog, or like, I shouldn't say that. It's more like a way to track someone's journey. Like, and Magic just happens to be the backdrop, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what Magic is for a lot of people is that it's the event that brings people together, but it's not actually like the focal point. It's being around those people, right? Where you're all meeting there, the place is like also part of it, and you all happen to be playing cards. So that's why I've just really enjoyed that project so far, and hopefully it does even better in the future. I have full confidence in it. So yeah, this is kind of like how I solve all problems. Again, going back to like problem solving is like I see a problem and I try not to replicate the solution. Is like, what if I just didn't do that, right? What if I made a thing in a minute and no one says anything? It's just, will people watch it? Apparently they do. Can people handle without a board and shaky cam? They can. And the other aspect of Untitled is I really like the idea that it's so low budget that anyone can do it, right? Like a lot of people want to tell their stories, but they're worried about like, I don't have the 2 cam set up with the right lighting and the overhead. How do you even solve the overhead, right? There's going to be glare, like all this stuff. You actually don't need to. You could just pick up your phone. I mean, of course there's like skills involved in editing and all that stuff, right? But
sure, you
can start that journey by just picking up your phone and trying it, right? If it fails, that's fine. Fail cheaply. As long as you make your failure cheap and you learn from it, that's good. That's like the startup.
Right. That's the startup mentality. And this is the other thing that I'm sorry I went on a very long ramble just now, but that's another thing that I think is absolutely great about Untitled is it's a back to basics in a way for content. What I mean is like, if you look at an early Mr. Beast video, he didn't have like the $10 million budget. It was very like grassroots. It was just him and the iPhone camera, and he just edited it himself. And then now we're in this era where like everything is so polished, right? Like even to do this interview, like I'm supposed to have a decent microphone and you're supposed to have a decent camera. And like people get so fixated on that. But I think there's a kind of purity to just saying, let's go back to basics. It's just about the content. It's not about having a $3,000 camera, and you're designing it in a way where you can't have a $3,000 camera because not everybody is going to be able to do a selfie with a $3,000 camera and like film it, right? And you're also doing something super innovative, which is like passing the phone around to different people, which is like unprecedented, right? Like when in the history of content has there ever been like, at least in Magic, has there ever been like different points of view? Like you're literally giving people different points of view and a voice. So it's like there's something very pure about that, and you're going back to a lo-fi aesthetic that is actually the revolution, which is like really funny if you think about it. But I'm just someone who always like thinks about how things are made, so it's like there's that whole part of it is just like absolutely fabulous for me.
Well, I think that's why it's also so engaging, right? Is that first of all, everyone knows how to use this phone, right? So because everyone knows how to film with this, you're also able to get that person is the director, right? They're able to frame the shot, follow like the way they follow it, the way they jump between the players and what they want to look at. It just adds all that quality to it because you're watching the game through their perspective. You're not consciously thinking like, oh, I'm watching it from like CJ's perspective right now or whatever. But it all works together, and you believe in that story because it's just so like natural and honest, which is very cool.
So how are you thinking about pushing the envelope further or experimenting farther with this series?
So I think the lo-fi model works, and I can technically keep shooting the way I have been. I've actually supposed to stop shooting it, but then life happens, and I'm like, oh, this is such a cool story right now. I have to do it. Like the most recent episode was for my birthday celebration at my friend's house, and it's 2 a.m. and we're all sitting there, and someone goes, "Wouldn't this be a cool Untitled thing?" I was like, shit, yeah, okay. so then we just started filming it, and it was great. But there was another time. This is the next episode that I need to release. It's taking me forever to edit. Again, I did not intend to film anything for Untitled because I'm in the middle of rebranding and upgrading it. I was in LA with MTG Hot Dog my friend Lauren and Shauna, who used to be on the command zone or work on the command zone team. We were hanging out and we're playing Magic at this LA game store called Turn Zero Games, playing CEDH. Played a couple games, and then Lauren goes, "Oh, I have a friend who's playing at a barbershop, and you want to go?" And I'm like, "Okay, I got nothing to do. Like, I actually have nothing to do this week. I was hanging out in LA with nothing to do, so like, yeah, I'm gonna do everything." So we all we drive to the barbershop, and I walk into this barbershop, and it's the most LA barbershop you'll ever see. Like, it's just so many photos everywhere. It's just the cutest little store, and it's just like it's such an endearing, like, simple, like, location. It has, like, you know, your fold out table is like everyone knows what this experience is like, but no one ever sees it, and it's in the fucking barbershop in LA at like 11 p.m. So I was like, damn it, we have to film this, we have to capture this. And then, you know, I've also the person hosting it, you know, is this lovely guy, and he has his own channel. So I was like, yo, plug it. Like, tell me what this channel is going to be like, and I will do everything I can to, like, you know, get you out there. So it's just like, there's so much of that. I don't know. There's so much magic in creating this stuff and being there. Like, I don't know. It's very exciting. But that game took 3 hours. So it was just a lot of editing. Even like another cool thing about Untitled is that at the moment, because it was a one phone process, I'm already editing while I'm filming. Like, I would film, and eventually they start fetching. I'm like, you want to take your time? Cool, I'll stop. You're done? We'll go again. And it saves me a lot of time, you know, because I'm already editing. It's only one shot, so I don't have to, like, go through different things. So even in that sequence, like, even in that process, that game is very complex, and it'll take me forever to edit. But I know I want to talk about how to upgrade it, but this is another really interesting thing I learned. So I went on game nights, and also I also met up with Professor for Shuffle Up and Play. And I learned, like, a lot of skills from both of them on, like, I guess, directing. And I don't think anyone would notice it. In my latest episode of Untitled for the birthday episode, I actually started to direct. I wasn't playing that game. I started to direct the people a little bit more, where I let it unfold. But as I'm watching, I'm filming, and I'm seeing how they're playing. I can be like, "Can you run that back, or can you do it this way?" So when I edit it, it feels completely natural. But now the viewer can actually follow the sequence of events much better than what I used to be able to do. So, like, there's all these little skills, like, all these things that goes into it to make it, like, a better product. But from, like, a technical standpoint, I kind of mastered, like, the lo-fi version, right? Like, we know the single phone version works. I want this show, this is in the nicest way possible, because I love the Professor. I want this show to rival his show. Like, I want to like, actual rival all the other major gameplay channels in the most, you know, like, friendly competition way, right?
Yeah, and do it your way, which do it in your own unique way.
And I don't think being scrappy is the way that's going to do it. I think for YouTube, like, the YouTube audience, there needs to be a degree of polish that they'll believe that, wow, this show feels like it's worth X dollars, or it feels like it's a 200,000 subscriber show. Therefore, I will subscribe and watch this thing, right? If it feels like it's a scrappy thing, even though it's very engaging, you mentally might not make that association where it's worth your time. So I want to see, and I did a lot of research in, like, for Warhammer 40k gameplay video, tabletop RPG video, because what I don't want to do, what I know won't work is following other, like, Magic models, right? Because it's just two different things. What I do want to explore is, I want to keep the tabletop aesthetic, or, like, that perspective, right? So how do other games, high-end games, do that, right? And it's an exploration, or a more experimentation in, like, with better budget and a better team and people actually thinking through it, how can we keep the spirit of it while making it feel like it's $1 million or whatever, right? It's not. I don't have $1 million, but it's again another like challenge.
Another challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes so much sense, because I also think just saying, sometimes I think putting unnecessary constraints on yourself, like, that's going to stop you from growing. I mean, literally growing the channel, but also like literally growing as a creator. Like if you say that I'm only doing lo-fi, or I'm only doing this and I'm not doing that, it's just very hard to grow that way. Like you have to be willing to mix it up. I think you've got the right mindset, which is like a mix of the practical versus like longer term goals as a creator. But I'm really confident that you'll figure it out just from talking to you today. But it's like, it's just so fascinating, because it's like there's no other field, I think, other than content creation where you have to like juggle all these things. Like there really isn't. Like even getting a company to Series A funding or to get a certain degree of like revenue, that's still, I mean, that's just a different ballgame, right? So I'm not trying to make the analogy, but it's just like there's so many things, but there's also an aspect here which is like so many things have to land, and you can only do so much to like give it a good chance of landing. But then in the end, it's like multiplying the probability of this by this by this. Like all these things have to line up. But that's also why we chase it, because there's that potential, right?
Yeah, and I think so even though like my expectation or my strong ambition of rivaling the professor, and I love him, again, this is not like a bad type of competition. Like I set myself, like I always expect, I think this is also a good piece of advice for any content creator, is always like expect that this is not going to be the thing that's gonna take you to superstardom, right? I can put as much money as I want, as much brains, as much time, as much thinking into Untitled. I can have the best guests, I can have the best game, literally all the right conditions for this thing to be successful. And I know that there's a strong chance it just won't. Like sometimes it just doesn't work out that way, right? Like that's just the content creation or content kind of works that way. Not everything, no matter how hard you try, is gonna work. And accepting that it's again the long game. It's about endurance. It's about making being able to consistently put out more results and try to like break through. That's the thing that's gonna get to like, I guess, success. And not so much like all this other stuff going on, like putting all your eggs in that basket, right? Like when, for example, when I go on game nights, I never for a second thought like, this is going to be my moment. Everyone's going to know who I am. I'm going to be super famous and I'm going to be the president. It's like, they're probably going to watch this game. I might get a couple subscribers. That's it. You know, like I have to be prepared for like both options. I think a lot of content creators always are like, always thinking like this is going to be the next thing, and then when it doesn't happen, they're so like devastated that it really brings them down. So I think just being not realistic, but just understand that it's just hard work, it's just endurance,
it's just long term. You just have to think for the long term.
And some people, they will get lucky and you won't get lucky, and unfortunately that's just like what happens with like the algorithm, right? Like someone might make exactly the same thing as Untitled, but somehow like it just works better, right? And I can't fault them for it. Just have to be happy, like, good job, you got there. And I'm gonna keep trying until eventually I will break through and I will get to where I want to go.
It's just about keeping yourself in the game. Like as long as you're not exiting the game, like as long as you have enough endurance to keep playing the game, then you'll have more shots at it. I think you're right. Like I also, by the way, have talked to a lot of people about their game nights appearance. I'm glad you brought it up, because not to ask you a lot of questions about it, but I feel like they have similar reactions. Like they're very happy, they're very proud, they're honored to be invited to game nights, and it's a fantastic experience, and they get a look inside the game night studio and they learn things as creators. That's always like a common denominator. But also I think people are realistic. Like this is just one part of my body of work that I'm building up. So it's not like there's no overnight success. You just do a lot of things incrementally over time. And maybe you get lucky and you can like fast forward 5 steps. But for most people, it doesn't really happen that way. It's just, I hate to use the term, but it's a grind, right? You just have to keep playing the game.
And the most valuable thing I have from like that experience is like just meeting people there and like making those relationships and learning from each other. Yeah. I mean, like not to think about it from like almost a business standpoint of networking. It's just like, that is my greatest takeaway is I got to meet Josh Lee Kwai and I got to see how he worked. And he, even though he didn't formally teach me stuff, like just how seeing him work, see like the way he would direct, you know, events or stuff like that, or how he even taught me how to like say certain things or like the beginning sequence of how to introduce myself. Super valuable. And the friendships I make, you know, with like Voxy and also Josh and everyone else, not from a content standpoint, like that is like the real, I guess, takeaway, like the memories of like also meeting other people there is like, that's what I'm getting out of this. And not so much like the 200 subscribers I get onto my channel.
Yeah, it's not the code hard numbers. It's more about the connecting, right? Connections, I should say, not networking. Yeah. Speaking of connections, can you talk a bit about your involvement with the community? Because I know from speaking to a few folks about your body of work or your contributions, like that's a big part of what drives you as well. There's a kind of like an underlying current of, I want to contribute to the community. So tell me about maybe define the community for you and then what it means to you and what kind of, how you think about that.
Okay. So, the community to me, I mean, it's tough. Like, I think I could answer this much better, like a year ago, or when I first started, because the community is basically the shitheads I talk to every day online on Discord, and we play games all the time together. And the community is still the same to me, but ever since I started making more content, and then I'm stretching myself a little bit more thin on other things, it's harder for me to like be on the same, you know, be on Discord every night with people, or like always hang out in general with them and talk with them all the time and stuff like that. It's just, to me, it's the same community, but my connection to them, unfortunately, is like, even though I'm like fighting for them all the time, it's just I don't have as much time to like talk with them. So I would say it's the same, like that's always a community I'm like trying to represent or like help, or like fight for. But lately I feel like it's just hard, you know, when there's like I have all these other things going on.
It's just a function of time, really.
Yeah. It's a function of time, exactly. And how it drives me is basically like it's everything. It's the reason why I like almost do anything online. So recently, let me think about this example. Recently, I was talking to someone about how important the online CEDH community is to me, and I think a lot of people might think this is stupid, but I don't think it's stupid. Where I basically told them, if I don't have these tangible people that I know of, like Sinestra, and everyone, I know I just said Sinestra, I love everyone else, it's not playing favorites or whatever, but like, if I didn't literally know the names and the usernames of these people and the voices and have like direct connection with who they are as people, I don't have the drive to be like, time to fight for competitive commander and like make sure it's represented well and all this stuff.
Faceless commander fan number 51 at LGS I've never been to, right?
Exactly. Like, to me, like from a morality standpoint, like I want to represent everyone all the time and make sure that they feel included in a game of Commander, right? But without like directly having people like, you know, in your mind when you're doing things, it's just hard to create that connection. And somewhat recently, like there was like a little bit of, I guess, tension within the community, and it was like super heartbreaking because like CDH is very, very close knit for like the longest time because it's such a small community, and it's I would say it's everyone has the shared like background of being what is it? Being the person that is ostracized from other commander experiences, because everyone used to hate like CEDH players because they're the people who show up at your pod and like win on turn 2 when everyone's still playing like Kodama's Reach, right? The pub stompers or whatever. That history, everyone has a shared history of like not being accepted, elsewhere and being ostracized and just like being hated on. So we are just really tight knit because we know like this is it. Like this is our space. We don't mess with people outside and they don't mess with us. This is our community. And then as the community kept growing and growing and growing, where at least I'm learning that, this is no longer the same community that I first hopped into just from volume. Right now, there's different perspectives and different, not to say factions, but different like modes of thinking. And now, there's tension when there's like, oh, I no longer agree with like what you're doing or what you're doing, right? Just from sheer like numbers, right? And it's so difficult for me to like see people like argue and like fight that way, because it's like I'm not sure of myself if the way I described it is like that community is my foundation, and if my foundation is not secure, how can I like I don't feel secure in what I'm doing, right? When I know my own community is like fighting amongst themselves. I mean, fighting might be dramatic, but like it was definitely a little tense before, but that's how important community is to what I do. I mean, if you think about the content I made before, is like it's about making the 5 people who really get the joke laugh, right? And it's always been about that, but now that the community is much bigger, like it's just harder to serve the 5 people when the 5 people are now 50, right? That joke's just not going to hit across 50 people.
Right. It doesn't scale that well for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that. I mean, I'm not in the CEDH community, but I think the fact is communities change, people change, and agendas naturally arise. And for a group to be basically you described as like kind of historically marginalized, and then finally figuring out like now there's people who are, maybe this is a bad analogy, but like now they feel like people are trespassing on their lawn because this is like my carefully curated community that I've been growing in my little garden because nobody wanted me here. So I went and like started my community in this island, but now they're like people coming in the boats and like they want to like have their point of view, but damn it, I've been in this community so long, I just can't do anything else. Like that's just like human nature in a nutshell. So it's like, and the fact that you came from that island and now you're the prodigal daughter or son, like going back to that island, you're just like, this is not the community that I recognize anymore. And it's kind of scary and nerve wracking in some ways, right?
Yeah. And I think it's just a lot of people don't see the amount of dedication, like CEDH, I guess, I don't know how to describe them, like people who create resources and things like that and like create a database or like put their time and effort. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes is as invisible that to people that don't really appreciate and don't really know of, and it's just very easy to like, I don't know, just kind of dismiss it a little.
I think it's like that in other communities as well. Like there's a lot of groundwork that people do to build it up. Like whether it's like developing a deck from what it was like 5 years ago to now, but then now people are coming in and they just take the result and they just, I'm not saying they claim credit for it, but they kind of just look at things in their own selfish lens. It's like, what have you done for me lately? Like, okay, so like they don't recognize or care about like the work that's been put into place to build the foundation for the last 5 years. They just care about like, what can you do now? And why are you playing this like crappy build? Like this person has a better build. Like they're coming in with different intentions. And that's just so hard to do, especially in a community like Discord, where it's not even like Reddit, where you can upvote or downvote things that are relevant. Like I mean, that's the internet in a nutshell, right? The good thing
Hmm.
about the internet, everyone has a voice. The bad thing, everyone has a voice. Like, how do you even make sense of all that? And now you're also a known person in the community, so it's like you're probably being enlisted to be like faction A versus faction B, and it's like, and people are kind of like, I miss the old Rebel, and it's just like, how does a human mind even deal with all that stuff? Because I know I can't. So it's like,
That's why I have an
and
AI.
you're more well known than I am. So it's like I'm trying to extrapolate that. You know what I mean?
Well, I think of it. I always try to be like super objective in like all the problems I have to solve, and like it's very easy to like feel, especially when you have a history to and a personal connection to a lot of things that you want to like be like, yeah, faction A forever, ride or die forever, like tattooed over here.
Nintendo forever, man. It's never
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, but the way so part of my like move to 1v1 Magic is also like to learn a lot more about what other perspectives are like or what other communities are like within Magic, right? Because CDH is very vocal online and it's a very unique culture. And I'm not saying the culture is like great or like, should be idealized or whatever. It's just different. And I want to see like, how do other people literally talk with each other, and how do other people like interpret decks or like critique each other and stuff like that? Because I think there's like some miscommunications earlier because of there's just different, like there's just more voices coming into this garden, right? So what I'm trying to do is just understand like, all right, here's all my different user groups, these are how they talk, and try to understand the intent of behind why they're talking, and then create like understanding between like, okay, well, it may sound like this, but actually what they're trying to do or the reason why they're doing a certain thing is because of this, right? And we can, and I'm also trying to like, I'm talking with like everyone to understand what their goals are. So then I can objectively say like, you know what? Yeah, faction A was wrong, like, or these parts of community actually just sucked. And we have nostalgia for like a bad thing. Or, parts of things that used to work for a group of 5 people just doesn't work for 50 people now. So that's kind of how I try to pursue it.
That's good. In a way, it's really the only way, right? It's to try to be objective, and I mean, what else are you going to be, right? I know people represent themselves differently online, but I'm glad you're sticking up for that. And also, speaking of community, you're now also a prominent. I mean, you've always been in leadership positions in Magic, but now you're in the Commander Advisory Group as well, the CAG or the CAG.
Yeah.
So I know you're a more recent member. Tell me what that experience has been like so far.
The same. So I think
Just bigger pond.
yeah. Without the CDH, like if we went back to the previous conversation, remove the whole CDH part of it, that's also kind of like, I don't want to say my appeal, but like the reason why that I think my perspective is valued for the RC and the CAG is because I'm not thinking, I think about or talk about CDH and Commander overall objectively together. Like I understand what CDH players are like, and I also understand what what I guess their representation is like I understand their place within the overall Commander experience, what other Commander players are experiencing, and what the problems are across the entire spectrum, right? Again, going back to like user group A, B, C, D, right? So go like the transition over to the CAG, I don't think there's ever been a transition really. Like in my mind, when I started having this discussion with Sheldon and also the RC, I always like, I guess, expect failure. But it's not failure it's not really failure. It's more like, even if I don't get a title, I'm still always gonna be doing the same thing I'm doing, right? The title is almost meaningless. Not to say the title itself is meaningless, but like to me, it's add a label, take away a label, I'm still going to be solving the same problem. I'm still going to be talking to the RC and the CAG members about the same things, and now I just happen to talk to them a little bit.
It's just
more.
making it official or formalized or in some outside way, right?
Yeah. So I don't think it's necessarily too different, but it is it's cool.
How do you think people perceive what you do differently because of that title? I know it doesn't really change that much for you internally, but I mean, is there like a perception change that you can feel at all?
I don't think so at all. You know, do you know who Alex Kessler is?
Yes.
Okay, so Alex Kessler.
But maybe we can explain it. He's also a content creator.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe you can explain what he does better than I can.
He has a podcast and also a YouTube, Masters of Modern, and yeah, I think he originally focused mostly on modern content, but he also does a lot of Commander content as well. He also has a rocking toy company, toy brand called Kess Games. So you know, if we have kids that likes balls, go check it out. But Alex Kessler, when I was announced as a CAG member, we were having brunch with other people, I think, or maybe I wasn't announced yet. But at some point, he was like, "You're very interesting as a CAG member because you've always been more of like a trickster. My online personality has always been very mischievous. So giving someone who's mischievous some like not authority, but like maybe like putting them in a more official position is very interesting because it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. At least that's what he said. So to me, it's still basically the same. I don't feel any like difference in perception. If anything, people just make fun of me like, "Oh look, it's CAG Rebel now. Don't ban my card." I can't ban cards.
I think you're the perfect person for something like this because you're not operating from a place of egotism. I do feel like a lot of people, in some ways we all are, but it's about to what extent. I feel like we all use Magic to sort of realize our self-worth in different amounts.
Oh, I definitely do.
I don't. I mean, sure. I'm just saying some people go really over the top. Like, you know, it's like their life is their deck, or somehow having like a tweet that's a banger or something. And I know it's a stupid example, but some people really get off on titles and being recognized. I would say even some people in the CAG and RC, but you're not that kind of person. And I think the diversity of, I think there was a terrible topic recently about diversity of like CAG members in RC, and I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole, but I think it's more important to have like diversity of thoughts. It's more important to have like diversity of what the fuck are you in here to do? Like that's actually more important than just like some of the other things, which again, sorry, I'm not going to get too much into that, but like I think you're a good counterpoint to that because you strike me as like the right kind of ego. Like you have ego, we all do, but it's about like trying to do something to understand the community and to develop it, to try to understand perspectives and try to like get people to think about things in a different way. Like I learned about so much about CEDH just from watching your CEDH video. I watched the whole thing. And it was just like, holy shit, I never thought about it that way. Cause like in my simple mind, it was like, I only thought of things in like black and white, honestly, when it came to Magic formats. So I just basically thought of CEDH as like, is this modern? Is this legacy? But I think what you were saying in the video is like, it's a state of mind. And it's like that gray area that I'm starting to really embrace. Frankly, this is why I'm interviewing people who are known more for Commander. It's like, cause I'm trying to understand that. Like I don't want to just talk to people who are just like really self-serving and they just care about like, you know, top 8ing a tournament so they can write a guide about that. Like you're just not someone who is in that mold at all. Like you can top 8 a tournament, you're very capable of doing that, but it's like, anyway, God, I'm going so long here, but like, I just think you're the right person to bring that sort of perspective. And I think diversity of perspective where people are not driven by ego and like promoting their own brand all the time, I think that's really important in Magic. And I think you embody that.
Thank you. That's very high praise. I do think there's one thing I do want to touch on the note of diversity. A long time ago, this is this is when I used to even wear a wig. Sheldon messaged to me. Sorry, that sentence was weird. Sheldon messaged me and asked me who should be on the RC. Like, if you were to add someone to the RC, who would you add? And he also added, you can add yourself if you want to. And I was like, no. Like, the thought was so abstract and like so impossible, right? And then I thought about, and I had the exact same like kind of perspective that you have, is like, I value diversity of thought, right? Of who should be on this kind of governing body, or whoever is thinking about the future of this format. I want to make sure that their thoughts are the things that is, is driving like the qualification, right? As like, diversity is important, but I also want to make sure that part as well. And then I thought, I gave my recommendation, and then I thought about it for like a month, maybe a month and a half. And then we had another follow-up discussion chat, and I told him, you know what, I thought about it a little bit more, and I think I understand why I told you I didn't vote, like I wouldn't vote for myself. And I think it's because I just look different, like from a diversity standpoint, right? Like, we're just different. Like, it's hard to even fathom that someone that looks like me or you would ever sit on. Like, I mean, it's dumb because it's a rules committee for a fan. It's a fan format now, official, of a card game, right? Like, we're not talking about real politics here. We're talking about who gets to ban a card for a card game. But still, a lot of people look up to it. A lot of people think it's very important and see themselves in it. And the idea that, like, the fact that I don't look like any of them, and the fact that I couldn't even fathom myself take a position there, is the problem, like part of the problem, right? And then I think I told them, like, I would, you know what? Now that I think about it, I would vote for myself for RC. And this isn't to say, like, this isn't to open up the diversity like discussion. I think it's just, the important point here is that I think the RC is kind of like this aspirational body for a lot of Commander players, and there is a real opportunity in letting someone see themselves represented on that body, right? Because it makes you feel like you deserve, not you deserve, but you are a part of that community, right? So I think, like, that's the only thing I'll talk about in regards to that subject, because that's a big subject. But that's just something that is kind of interesting.
I love the fact that you thought about the issue or the answer you gave for like a month and a half, and then went back. Like, I'm the same way. I'll still remember like some interaction I had 2 months ago. Maybe it's because I journal as well. It's just like, I think people appreciate it a lot more when, like, you don't just, when you give well-formed answers. I like, humans can tell that other humans are thoughtful. Like, and it, like, since you went back to Sheldon like a month later and said, maybe I should be on it, like, he knows that means, like, take it from me, he knows that you thought about it. It wasn't just like your initial answer. Like, you're just a really introspective person. And I think that's also a part of it that will help any committee or group, because we just have a tendency to be super like short-sighted, right? Like, I'm sure like next week we'll forget about the $1,000 proxy booster packs. But like, no, I mean, I remember stuff that happened in Magic like 5 years ago. I'll remember this conversation in 3 years or whenever, when you have 1 million YouTube subscribers or whatever. And like, I'll be like, that was when I talked to Rebel, and when she was just getting started. But like, I think perspective is really important, and also like the longevity of the perspective. Like, so I think for those reasons, like, I think you're going to be a really good, or you are a good fit for those sorts of things.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Rebel, I've kept you up long enough in your part of New York. What is the best place for people to find you on the internet, or where you would like your content to be found?
You can find me on YouTube. My YouTube account is Rebell Son, just when you spell Rebel, it sounds like, sounds like it spells like what it sounds like. Just make sure you have two L's at the end. Rebell Son without the two L's is a very different channel, so you don't want to land on that one. You can also find me on Twitter. It's a reversed Sun Rebel, which is kind of bad thing there. I don't remember why I did that, but there you go.
Thank you, Rebel, for taking the time, and this has been a real pleasure talking to you. I hope you have a good rest of the evening where you are.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for having me. I really had a great time.